introduce herself. She's phenomenal. There's Christopher Ruah. Dear friend, another person who is brand new to his work, and I hope he's in the room, is Pastor Lauren Vance.
Hallelujah.
Yay! Okay, Pastor Lauren Vance, welcome.
Yeah.
He is stepping into the role of Executive Director of Consultation to Clergy. They are there for all churches, deacons, pastors, Synod authorized lay ministers in Region 1, which is composed of 6 synods. Anytime you need a little extra help.
I don't know.
Stuff,
I don't know what did it. That's the scary
you're
thing.
dealing with something unexpected and you don't quite know how to walk your way through. Together
Get rid
with
of
the
some of
Juris
these
Synod,
things that I
we
don't.
support one full-time staff person to be available as a consultant.
Whether this is doing it.
If sometimes it helps to have a wise man from the east, and sometimes it does.
Oh.
And this one actually knows what he's doing. Consider seriously. So glad.
That's great. Thank you.
As chair, I now call this assembly back into session, and in order for us to do our business of the day, which is a lot, we need to ensure that we have a quorum. And so I call the chair of the Credentials Committee, Pastor Mary Anthony, to assist me.
You won't be here.
Thank you, Bishop. And I want to take a moment to thank the rest of the instructed Credentials Committee who have been very flexible and patient here.
I think go into the
Julie
Zoom
and Becky
meeting,
and Mary, thank you.
into your audio settings.
We have 393 voting members. We already finished. There are 234 present.
Output level. Oh, that's the speaker.
And we
Oh.
have a summary. For those curious for more
Oh, 'cause you
detail,
want the microphone.
they're on slides behind me. But I can either see them or my paper.
63% of the voting members present are lay, 37% are rostered. 61% of voting members are women, 37% of voting members are men, and 2% of voting members identified as gender expansive. Thank you. Is there more?
Is that enough? Thank you, Pastor Anthony. We now have an official quorum, therefore we are in order. Let's begin plenary 2, and we'll begin with my report. Oh, and I need to add that last night we received 1 additional nomination, and so all of the elections are non-contested but 1. And after lunch, you will receive the bio and we'll be voting on that position at that point. I want to talk about hard things and hope. Good news, bad news and good news. We'll start with the bad news first, or at least the challenges. How many of you, if you wouldn't mind standing up, are retired or plan to retire in the next few years? Please rise. Just look around for a minute. Thank you. Proud. Some of you are very excited about that status. This is just one way in which the church faces some interesting times ahead. In the military, I'm told they call it VUCA. Have any of you heard that expression, VUCA? VUCA times are times that are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And military being military, they flesh out what each of those words mean with many, many, many bullet points and paragraphs. But the truth of the matter is that Christian mainline churches in this day and age face an enormous challenge. You saw the number of retired people in this room, and as I look around, this looks like one of our younger assemblies in the past couple of years. And I'm not, that's not funny, but it kind of is, because this is where we are. And so what does that mean, as good Lutherans might ask? It's important for us to know the truth and state the truth so that we can move forward out of honesty. But there's a lot of hope in that too, because what the foundation that you have laid, which may by future generations, let's be honest, be dismantled, is full of good, solid, hard wood, which may be put to use in different shapes and different ways to create different structures, or no structure at all, just perhaps a dance floor. We don't know, because we're living in VUCA times. But you have done the work of the gospel, and it will take new shape. I'll never forget when I took a tour of the women's monastery in Mount Angel, and our tour guide, I took my youth group, there were 10 of us back then, I was young. And our tour guide was a 93-year-old sister. And the kids were asking, questions like, what time do you have to get up in the morning to pray 5 times a day? And I was asking questions like, what are you going to do when the average age is 80 years old? And she said, you know what, Pastor, I'm not afraid, because I believe in a God of resurrection. And I just thought, that's the gospel. She is not afraid that even if her entire community dies, and she knows it will, something will be born because they've been living out of Christ's love. We are in that moment. And that's the gift of this moment. And one of the ways, you'll hear me say it 10,000 times, but one of the ways that we are going to take those planks and beautiful boards, and they're not all perfect, and build something anew is by deepening our relationships and knowing one another. So our horizon statement is this: moved by the mystery of love, we are and are becoming a wild web of relationship, a communion of communities, cultures, and diverse faith expressions, walking into life as we seek the life of the world together in the spirit Jesus promises. I was a campus pastor at Portland State for some time. I never hear many whoops when I say Portland State. If I said, U of O or OSU, thank you, Shirley. If I found myself helping a younger person discern, I would often say, is this decision helping you? Are you walking into something that is giving you life? Because if you're walking into something that is giving you life, it is probably a call. If something is death dealing, probably not. I wonder if we have the internal fortitude to look at our practices as congregations and as a synod and say, which of these steps are leading us into life? And which are, maybe we wouldn't say death because that's dramatic, of an ENFJ like I am, like, it's leading us into death, but it's leading us into weariness. It's leading us into crankiness. It's leading us into resentment because the younger generations aren't picking it up and doing it the way we know how to do it. Is it giving us life, or is it dealing us death? So I believe deeply in the way that relationships can expand our faith and our capacity to bear the gospel of Christ with courageous love. And I love the notion of a wild web of relationship because it's not in our control, it just keeps expanding. One of the gifts of working with the disaster preparedness team this past 2 years has been, I met a fire chief up the Mackenzie River who is brave and bold in ways you can't imagine. And she's been one of the first female fire chiefs in the entire country for kind of a long time. And she made the call to get the residents out of that place and saved lives, even though some of her peers were saying she's being way too jumpy. She's not being a responsible fire chief. Is John Core in the room? Christine, she saved the lives of John and Christine Core without a doubt. And I will be praying for her forever. And I told her that. That's the way a wild web of relationship works. Because of the reckoning with racism that so many of you in your congregations are doing with Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, I heard the story of a leader in this state who went to an internment camp because his family was Japanese American when he was 9 years old. And it was near Klamath Falls, and he remembers the place, and he remembers the loss that the family took and how they never financially recovered in the same way. And he was perhaps the best storyteller I have ever heard. But the gift he gave me was expanded imagination and a deepened commitment to make a difference for all people in this state. Wild web of relationship. I had no idea I would encounter that man. And he died in the past year. Am I right, Ron? He is no longer here. And so we recorded that story on video, and it's accessible to any of you who want to understand more about. I thought I knew. I'd read 2 books. That's the way my life works. I knew nothing, really. I knew almost nothing. So when we talk to one another and a centurion and I'm Peter and we're da-da-da, we're building relationships. We're thickening the fibers of God's web, and I'm grateful. One of the challenges has been trying to do this in pandemic, and I want to recognize those of you who've come into the Synod and tried to be a part of the weaving of this webby tapestry. And so I'd like to honor you and recognize you now. If you're one of the people who's come into the Synod during pandemic, if you are a pastor or deacon who has been called in let's say the past 3 years, please stand. And let's hold our applause till the very end. But let's recognize these pastors, deacons. Don't be shy. Look at we'll applaud. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. And please make an effort to reach out. It's also our most ecumenically diverse group of folks, so they probably have things to teach us and share. If you are an intern pastor in our Synod, please rise. Thank you, Sina. We are so glad you're here. If you're a seminarian or in candidacy in any way, beginning to explore a vocation in ordained ministry, please stand. Mo, Des, Mary Carter, India, Andrew Langford-Kinda. If you're a Synod authorized lay minister helping a congregation which is vital and small, please rise. Jackie Callender, we are so glad you're here. If you are on the edge of our innovation and are deconstructing and reconstructing as a mission developer of any kind, helping us walk into Christ's courageous love, please rise. I know you're out there. Yes, Jeannie, you. Thank you for being who you are. Reach out to them because the things they're doing are powerful. When you live in VUCA times, you cannot say, here's our 5-year plan. Here are our SMART goals. Sign on, team. Gather the troops at Jesus' table. No. You take one step at a time, and you don't call it a plan or a vision. You call it a horizon because you can kind of barely see as the earth bends, but you can step on solid stones. And so we've named some stepping stones, and they'll sound familiar to you. I'm sure there's some of the key pieces of your walk in your campus ministry or congregation. Whatever it is that you exist in, scripture and spiritual practices. I'm wondering if John Bissler, he's in the back. I'm going to call him out because he's my friend. Would you stand up, John Bissler? John Bissler was congregational president at Spirit of Grace a few years ago at Spirit of Grace. And we were trying to work on how we had our steering team, our council meetings. And I said, I think we need to be more intentional about spiritual practice at the beginning of those meetings, because sometimes they got a little bit heated, not everyone agreed all the time. And I said, what if we spent between 20 and 30 minutes in some kind of spiritual practice or Bible work at the beginning? And he said, Pastor, we don't have time for that. Our meetings will go till midnight. There's no way. I said, I actually think it might ground us. Let's try it for 3 months. Your pastor's smart if they do the thing. Let's try it for 3 months as an experiment and reflect on what we've learned. And so we did. And he was the biggest convert after a year. I didn't realize how much we needed that. The business is important, but we need to remember why we're doing the business in the first place, right? God's work, our hands. So are we grounding our work in spiritual practice and Bible? And are we encountering the characters in the Bible? If someone were to ask you, what's your favorite verse, or who's your favorite character, or who's your least favorite character? Let's wrestle with those people. They long to be blessing us, touching us like Jacob was by the angel, making us stronger in our spiritual muscles. Shared power and respect. The days of clericalism, the days of hair pastor, the days of pastor knows best, I don't know if they ever existed. They maybe were an illusion, but they are long gone now. So yes, amen. So when you as pastor or deacon leave your congregation, will there be enough lay leaders to carry on in a transition? If we can't find any interim pastor for you, except pulpit supply, make sure there are, or that's a disservice to the congregation and the synod. Our job as roster leaders is to empower you all to be the ministers, not just in the world, but in the church. Amen. Sustainability. We've got to make sure that what we do is ecologically responsible and financially responsible. And this is maybe my least favorite, because it means having fewer people on synod staff than we've had in a long time, even as demands increase. It means making impossible budgetary decisions between 2 or 5 incredibly worthy organizations. It means not being able to compensate people at the level at which they, I don't know what my preposition is, deserve. Do you know what I mean? But that is the demand of the job. And does that sound familiar, council members and congregations? Yeah. Sustainability is important. Story. This one comes out of Salt and Light Leaven, and I love it. If they ever are involved in an action in the community or even an extracurricular service, something, they make sure it comes out of the stories of the people in the congregation. Because we can all be like dogs at a whistlers convention when it comes to service. We should be helping there and there and there and there. But if our commitments come out of deep compassion and our own personal stories, they're far more likely to last. And what I said in my sermon yesterday about a culture of nice, where nothing is critically examined and stays on the surface, the more we start to tell our stories, the more we get rid of surface nice and we get to deeper interwebbing and connection. It's harder, it's more exhausting, takes more time, and it's the way that the gospel is held. Siblings. Have any of you ever found a relationship with a sibling of another faith or no faith deepens your own Christian practice? Raise your hand. Yeah. That's why I chose to go to a non-Lutheran seminary. 1, I wasn't sure I was Lutheran, but 2, I wanted to see, seriously, I wanted to see what else was out there and if my Lutheranness could withstand the test. I'm a so many generations Lutheran, but the more I was with Unitarians at Harvard Divinity and Methodists and Mormons and pagans and Wiccans, and I'm not joking, and they challenged me and questioned me and said, how can you be a Lutheran when Luther he hated women, he was such a misogynist. And I thought, oh, no one ever asked me that in my Lutheran congregation. It forced me to go deeper and it made me realize, yeah, I'm Lutheran after all. There is enough depth here, not just in the theological tradition, but in the liturgical tradition to feed my soul for the rest of my life. And if it was good enough for my great grandma Anna, it's probably good enough for me. But I had to dig into its depths to get to the gems, to the treasures. So let's make sure that we have living relationships with our neighbors of all varieties, and we will be delighted to know, I suspect, the more we go there, that our faith is deepened. And then finally, shameless, fearless innovation. Have we had to try any innovation during these last 2 years, right? And haven't we found that sometimes you try and sometimes you fail and sometimes you try again and sometimes you fail, and that's becoming a learning community, and that's how it goes. Innovation is a part of our hope and our future, and we need to keep doing it. Those boards that need to be taken down and put together in new ways and new shapes, that's exactly what we need to be about. And we will at least half the time, but we better not quit for the sake of our neighbors. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, "A church that exists only for itself is no church at all." If our worship isn't speaking to our neighbors, there is something deeply wrong. Deeply wrong. So let's talk now about the challenges. I'll go quickly because you don't need me to tell you a heck of a lot. When I entered my call about 27 years ago, there were 6 million members in the ELCA. Anyone know how many there are now? 3.5, and it's going down fast. That was a couple years ago. It may be about half of what it was when I was first ordained. 25% of our congregations have not baptized anyone in the past couple years. 50% have not confirmed anyone or welcomed any adults through affirmation of baptism in the past couple years. When I first started in the Oregon Synod, and looking around, it's a little bit shocking, but I was among 10 ordained women. We're close to 50-50 at this point. I don't know exactly what the numbers are. There were no LGBTQ pastors or deacons, and there were no pastors of color. 0. We're making steps, and it's slow. We've got a lot of work to do. When I first entered the Oregon Synod, a third to a half of our congregations had 2 pastors or a pastor and a deacon, 2 rostered leaders. Now I can count them on one hand. And almost half of our congregations can afford a half-time pastor or less. Almost half can only afford a half-time pastor or deacon or less. And that's in 27 years. This shift is huge. And it's hard to take in. The other reality is that there's an incredible shortage of rostered leaders coming out of seminary. So and a shortage of interim pastors. We have almost 30 congregations in an interim season or entering one in the next 6 months. And we have 10 trained interim pastors, 30 and 10. Raise your hand if your congregation is in an interim, a transition time, or will be soon. Just raise your hand. And some of those congregations that aren't here because they're exhausted and they don't yet have an interim. That's where we are. And the challenge with a budget that isn't massive is that scholars at Harvard Business School and places like that say that when you're in a time like this, you should spend at least 30% of your budget on innovation. At least 30% of your budget on innovation. When it comes to the budget, let's look and see if that's what we're doing. Not exactly. But there's so many things that give me hope. So here's the good news. During pandemic, when we were absolutely in VUCA time, especially first months, your giving remained constant, and some of our congregations received more income. How many of you are in congregations that met your budget or even exceeded it during pandemic times? Thank you. Yeah, let's thank them. And I can't tell you how much I want to say thank you because the Synod has not had to cut any staff. And it could have been otherwise. Thank you, Patty. It could have been otherwise. The generosity is astounding. Another piece of good news is that the Oregon Synod for a very long time has been known as a place willing to take risks, be creative, be a hub of innovation. Bishop Emeritus Dave Browericki, his DEMs, oh dear, I have 1 minute left. His DEMs, Pastor Mike Keys is here somewhere, have done an incredible job of holding that and encouraging that. We need to keep going and not stop. We're learning how to be a faithful remnant as Christians. We are learning from our Jewish siblings that it doesn't have to be Christendom for us to be faithful. And in fact, there are gifts in that. You know, our Jewish neighbors never had all of their holidays honored. Our Hindu neighbors never got days off of school when their holiday. And so it sort of tests your faith in a way. And that can be gift. And we're learning to be more honest with one another. So in your packet is a sustainability assessment. It's not meant to shame, but it's meant to be a mirror for all of us to look at our congregations and say, where are we on sustainability? How huge is our deferred maintenance? What really is our budget for a rostered leader? What would it look like if our biggest giver died tomorrow? And that's meant to be a conversation starter around your council or Bible study table, not to strike fear into anybody's heart, but to encourage creativity in places where you are. Maybe that means partnering with a sibling of another faith. Maybe it means tearing down the entire building and building a different spiritual structure that can meet the needs of people who don't look anything like this room right here. But it will mean listening deeply to our neighbors. And marks of congregational vitality, these come out of years of, I'm going to be able to go through those, so let's just put them all up. Years of a study by the Presbyterian Church USA. Is there in our congregation and our synod and our campus ministry and our hospice units energy and skills for discerning collective vocation? Do you know how to talk to one another about horizon and vision? Do you really know how to facilitate rich and real conversations and pull in the people who are shut in at home and the teenagers who'd rather not come and make sure that their voices are involved too? Is that something that you know how to do? Room for new voices and active engagement of guests. I've heard a couple people say, yeah, we get, time is up. Yeah, we get a lot of new guests, but we aren't very good at integrating them. Or maybe we don't get any visitors at all. Do you take them seriously enough to listen to them, or do you just want them to sign up for your pet project committee? A culture of authenticity, trust, and capacity for hard conversations, or a culture of nice? Strategic collective risk-taking and a culture of experiments and mistakes for the sake of learning, or a council full of, we've tried that before, that'll never work. We've all been on those teams. Blurred lines between members and neighbors, and many mutual connections with the larger world. Do you have some people who aren't quite sure if they're members or not? That's a good thing. They're part of your ministries, and they don't need necessarily to recite your creeds, but they find love there. And many leaders, many decision tables, and many natural avenues for new leadership development. What you're doing is important and powerful, and in the light of Christ, you are changing the world. Let's continue to do that. Let's continue to reimagine a church which not only needs deconstructing, but needs reconstructing for the life of the world. Thank you. Part of the wild web that's giving me hope is our who will be speaking in a moment after. Is it after a break or just after a little public service announcement? I don't know. Somebody knows. But Susan Abraham is a professor at Pacific School of Religion, and she is a voice in academia who gives me hope for the church, not just academia, but for the church and the world. And so I'm delighted in a minute to introduce Susan Abraham, a part of my web. But first we have public service announcement from a dear and amazing human, Joel Woodell of Fund. Let's welcome Joel.
It goes without saying, but you know, I'm going to say it anyway. It's good to be here. Thank you, Bishop, for this opportunity to be among you. May I do this so I don't have to lean so much? It's great to be here. I'm Joel with the Mission Investment Fund of the ELCA. And the favorite word that I've had to utter these past 2 years, you won't believe it, but the word is relax. When the pandemic started, we had more than a couple of hundred borrowers who were in a fix, right? As some of you are they. You have mortgages and nobody's coming to church and the governor says, stay home. How will you pay your mortgage? And so they called me. How will we pay our mortgage? What will happen to us? I was instructed to say, relax. We have you. Do your best. Pay what you can. When things come around, we'll get back on track. How much fun do you think it is to be the person who gets to say, relax? We're not going to let you fall. And so we did. And now all but maybe 2 of those 225 borrowers are right back on track. So that's great. Well, it wasn't too many months later, the PPP program came along. Did anybody in the room call your local bank to get a PPP loan and they wouldn't return your call? And so the Federal Credit Union, our sibling ministry, got certified to be a PPP lender, but they didn't have millions of dollars, but we did. And so we said to the credit union, get the loans, we'll fund them, and then it will all be good. And it was. And when the PPP borrowers called me because they didn't know what box to check, I was able to say, relax. Because I knew, because I learned the hard way by doing it wrong about 76 times. But it was fun to say, relax. The Mission Investment Fund is able to do these things because the Mission Investment Fund is strong. But we're not strong for us. We're strong for you. And we're strong because of you. Many of you in the room are investors with us, and your investments come to us and we lend them to congregations to build things and do things and have mortgages. That's what we do every day, all day. And we're strong because of you. And so I say, thank you. Thank you if you're a borrower. Thank you if you're an investor. And thank you if you need somebody to help you in a financial fix. Give me a call. Maybe I can say, relax. Amen.
Amen.
But along
No, are we showing the video? Probably should, right? Video, yeah. My bad.
each of us looks to our faith for answers. But along the way, we should ask, how well do we connect what we learn in church to the world outside the sanctuary? For a mother struggling to provide a better life for herself and her children. A ministry offering daycare could make her challenges a a little less challenging. A ministry could build a family in temporary need a safe transitional home. Make a welcoming place for seniors. Or provide hot meals in the warmth of fellowship. Partnering with the Mission Investment Fund can make ministry possible. We use the money you invest in MIF to fund loans that help congregations and ministries increase their capacity for ministry and connect even closer to their communities. In short, be better neighbors and make a better world. The Mission Investment Fund of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. God's work, our hands. Each of us.
Thank you, Joel Woodell and Mission Investment Fund. Can you hear me? I'm going to introduce Dr. Susan Abraham at this point, and she has a handout that the deans will be handing out. So if you are a dean or a dean representative, please walk to your left. Susan Abraham is a professor of theology and post-colonial cultures at Pacific School of Religion. She is author of Identity, Ethics, and Nonviolence in Post-Colonial Theory, a Ronarian, that's a Catholic word, I don't know, Ronarian theological assessment, and co-editor of Shoulder to Shoulder, Frontiers in Catholic Feminist Theology. Ongoing research projects include issues in theological education and formation, interfaith and interreligious initiatives for social transformation, theology and political theory, global Catholicism, and Christianity between colonialism and post-colonialism. She brings wide experience and knowledge of higher education and institutional practices through her past affiliations with St. Bonaventure University, Harvard Divinity School, and Loyola Marymount University. Her publications, courses, and presentations weave practical theological insights from her experience of working as a youth minister in Mumbai, India, with theoretical perspectives from post-colonial theory, cultural studies, political theory, and feminist theory. Let's together welcome Dr. Susan Abraham.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I've often said in the past, I wish my mom was around when people were introducing me that way. So generous. I also want to ask your indulgence and forgiveness. I'm not 100% myself. I was infected with a bug by a little four-legged dog named Moses, who I call useless most of the time. His favorite thing to do is to wake me up in the morning. He's not my dog, he's my neighbor's dog. They can't leave the door open because he comes straight to my place. For some reason, we are in love. His favorite thing in the world to do is to jump on my chest and sneeze at me. So this is an interspecies contagion, which I've been struggling with for about 4 weeks now. So I'm not contagious, but I'll probably cough, and I'm so sorry about that. It's a great honor to be here. I barely can believe it. I wish I had known when I was 10 and 12 that this was in my future, because I would not have despaired as much. I'm a Roman Catholic. You should, and I grew up in India. So as a Catholic female, there was no place for me in the church. So you can imagine the struggle that I had in order to overcome a lot, in order to study what my spirit said I should study. My mother was horrified. She said, God gave you a brain. You should be a brain surgeon. After I grew up a little bit, I told her, Mom, that is what I do, except nobody bleeds. Well, once in a while. So my presentation today has to do with listening to the Spirit and stories in time and space. I bring to you also greetings from the Pacific School of Religion. There are a number of people praying for you, especially our president, President Vasquez-Levy and his family. The dog belongs to them, so hence the prayers. But the Graduate Theological Union too, a lot of you know the place and a lot of people know that you are meeting, so greetings from Holy Hill. So I want to begin this presentation by telling you what I will do today. I have a 3-layered presentation. The first layer starts about 3,000 years ago. The second layer is a little bit more close to us in time. It's the 12th century. And the third layer happened to me 20 years ago. So it's stories in time and space. So I'll start with what you will know, and you know this. I will start with a koan, a question. In the East, in traditions of the East, there are no discursive expositions like the kind that we are used to in the West. In the East, often a teacher's job is to ask a question. The teacher doesn't explain. The teacher asks the question, and that's it. That's the lesson. So the question is what I've termed here the Snake Sutra. Now, many of you may know the Snake Sutra, but I'd just like to give a little bit of background. Sutra in Sanskrit comes from the word sutram, which means puzzle or query or question. So the snake question is a question, and here is the question. And this is the entire lesson. Actually, I should just ask this question and leave, because that's the lesson. Whatever is revealed will be revealed, and whatever is not revealed will not be revealed. And that's the lesson. But Bishop Laurie said, don't do that. As I'm talking, you may be interested in things. I don't know. I've been asked variously, what kind of a name do you have? When did you come to the United States? I don't know. What are you thinking? If you scribble questions down, there are folks that will collect questions from tables, and I will choose 1 or 2 of those to respond to. As I'm speaking, ask me anything. There's nothing to hide here. So the question is this. How would you pick up a snake? Okay. Do you hear the Spirit? There are many promptings here, many ways to answer the question. There are right ways and there are wrong ways. Now, I personally, having grown up in India, we are not given to picking up snakes. It's a stupid thing to do, you never know. It's a wild animal, leave it alone. But the koan is not asking you about snakes. The koan in Asian cultures is what is called a gateless barrier. There is no gate, but there is a barrier, nevertheless. In this case, the barrier may be the answer. Does that make sense? In our haste to answer a question like that, it stops us from contemplating what this question is seeking from us. All these koans have one goal only. The goal is not a right answer. The goal is, who are you that seeks to answer this koan. The gateless barrier is always an encounter with yourself. As a teacher, as a theologian, as a Christian, as a woman, as a Roman Catholic, all the puzzles that I experience in my life really come down to one thing. But who are you, Susan, today, right now? Like anybody else, I like performing well. I woke up this morning and I'm hacking away in my room thinking, oh my God, this is going to be, a not very nice show. Because I'm going to be gasping for air and you're going to think I'm having a coronary, but really I'm just coughing because of useless. Whose name is Moses, by the way. Oh, there's a cough drop. Actually, I have cough drops in my pocket. I've had 3 bags of Ricola in these 4 weeks. Should buy stock in that company. Well, anyway, these koans are really meant to be encounters with who we are at any given moment. I, Susan, today am experiencing a little bit of stress because I feel that my voice isn't strong. I don't know how you're hearing me, but I feel my voice isn't strong. I feel a little shaky, and this is not good for me. And I have to ask myself, but why not? How dare you? You are here to open up the space to the Spirit, not to something called Susan. I encounter myself. So I would like you, because I'm not going to speak of this, I will start coughing. I'm going to take a sip of water. I'm going to take a little mini break, but in the mini break, I'm going to give you about 3 minutes. You can look at the questions over there in bullet point. They are, have you ever picked up a snake? What do you think the Snake Sutra is all about? Do you think ancient ideas have any relevance, or they do have relevance for our lives today? Would you agree that the Ruah is present in other religious traditions? Why or why not? Have a mini discussion. Maybe you will have a question or comment that you can then return to me, and I will have a conversation with you. 3 minutes. Thank you. Yeah, so they'll do the first part. They'll do the first part and they'll collect my questions.
You haven't said that you will collect your question today.
I said that already.
Okay, so I need to explain.
Right. Yeah. I hope I don't go over and I hope I don't go under. Okay. Thank you. I do have some warm water. Thank you. Okay. So the idea is that each of your tables has generated a question or a thought, which will be collected by Melissa and Juan Carlos there. Anything that you might think that I might respond to. I will also have to choose because there are 30 tables here, so I will choose among them. So as they're collecting those, I hope you had some way to connect with each other. And I just want to talk a little bit more about the gateless barrier and what its intent is. The point of the gateless barrier in Eastern traditions is to cultivate wisdom, not thought. This is a huge problem in Western contexts, where really what we are told constantly is to think. We have to think about everything. You have to think about thinking. And we spend a lot of time doing this. In Asian traditions, thinking is a suspect activity. There is suspicion about thinking. You know why? There is a problem with thought because the self that thinks imposes itself on thought. There is no pure thought. There is no objective thought. There is only subjective thought. Now, it would be one thing if we were all enlightened ones and we were thinking about thinking without the contagion of the ego. But in most Asian cultures, all Asian cultures, I think there is a negation of the understanding that thought is primary. Thought is self-referential. Thought is self-absorbing. Thought is self-projecting. I hear so many conversations at school and in public contexts where we wonder why our societies, and the United States is not alone in this, almost anywhere else is, why our societies are so polarized, the P word. We hear it all the time, right? Well, polarization arises out of a very particular egoistic matrix. It is our desires, our needs, our wants that gives force to polarization. So these sutras really try to undermine that particular negativity and asks us humbly not to put so much significance on the self. Instead, the gateless barrier is about creating an awareness about connectedness. Why would you pick up a snake? It's not how would you pick up a snake? Why would you pick up a snake? It's a wild animal. It deserves to be wherever it is, just like you deserve to be wherever you are. It is not about the snake over there and me over here. There is a connection between the snake and you and me. Cultivating that sense of inseparability, cultivating that sense of connectedness, that is the point of the koan. So I bring this story often because really, as you know by now, I'm not really talking about snakes. I'm talking about a metaphor. I'm talking about a metaphor that can look very like a snake. And I will explain that in my 3-layer story, because this 3 layers happened to me in my own growing and awareness of myself as a teacher and as a theologian. So I'll move on to the second part as we wait the questions, unless, are you done, Mel? So this is my favorite part of anything, because this is where I feel that I'm really talking to people. Thank you. Okay. Some of these are mischievous. Interesting. Okay, here's one that's a little mischievous, I think. Will God punish us for hurting snakes when we were young? If God were to punish us for all the things we did when we were young, I think God would be very busy. God has plenty of other things to do. Our God is not a punishing God. I don't know where one might have gotten that impression. This is a God that took on punishment, did not ask anyone else to do it, but took it on himself and put himself up on a cross, because that was the punishment that we invented for people we did not like. No one's going to punish you. It has already been taken on. Now, that question, like many of the others here, imagines that I am speaking about snakes. I am not speaking about snakes. This is endlessly frustrating to my students who will then say, well, what the hell are you talking about anyway? Then? I'll come to that. I'll come to what I'm really talking about. Let's move beyond snakes to another creature you should have seen this morning as you walked over to breakfast, because Juan Carlos and I saw many of them. I want to talk about worms. Your head should be whirling now, snakes, worms, whatever. So this story, this is a story, a hagiographic story, a hagiograph, which means that nobody knows whether it was true. But we accept it as true because it reveals something about the personality that we are talking about. So this is a story from our mutual tradition. So anything before the tradition, before the Reformation is our mutual tradition, right? So Francis of Assisi, who we all know and love. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi always said, if Christians were more like Francis of Assisi, I would convert. It's a very Hindu way of looking at the world, by the way. So Francis and the worm. So you know Francis. Francis was a degenerate, rich party boy, loved his wine and women and song before he had his conversion. Once he had his conversion and he changed completely, the word conversio in Latin means turning to. Once he turned completely to God, something happened to him. And what happened to him is what I was talking about a little bit earlier, a deep understanding of the interconnectedness of existence. The way he lived was so weird and strange that people called him the fool. So in the tradition, as you know, he is called the holy fool. The word fool, of course, is we reserve that term for people who we just don't understand. And I would say Francis of Assisi was not understood in his time. Here's something that he did. One day in Main Street, Assisi, I don't know what it was called then, there are, horses going by, people going by, cars going by, all kinds of things going by, very busy thoroughfare. And Francis is in the middle of the street doing something. Everyone who went by would smack him on the head and say, "Fool, move out of the way. What are you doing over here?" And he said, "Do you see this worm?" And everybody looked, and there was this little worm. "Do you see this worm? Today I am the servant of this worm." Now, that's a way to live in the world, right? That the health of worms, and you should have seen many today, many were out because it was raining, right? The health of worms reflects the health of this species that of course somehow thinks it is better than every other species. That's a product of thinking. We are inseparable from the worm. We are inseparable from the life that lives under our feet. With us here on this planet and over us in the air. We're inseparable. Often in classes, I've had to ask people, where is nature? And especially very young students, where is nature? They'll all point out of the window. See that tree over there? That is nature. We are nature. We are nature. The ancient koans, that's what it was asking about. The snake story is a deflection. If we focus exclusively on the literal idea of the snake, we are overthinking. We are not at the gateless barrier. In fact, we have erected a huge big barrier for ourselves. What it is asking us to do is to go beyond that thought and listen to the inseparability, the absolute connectivity, the absolute coexistence of all being in this world. In the Christian tradition, we preserve this idea of coexistence because the story of Jesus was about living together. If you look at any of the stories, any of the parables that he said and that surrounded him, all of it had to do with, but how do we live with each other? Now, of course, we think about each other just as us, the biped, this Homo sapiens. But it is each other, the worms, the snakes, the butterflies, the grass, the trees. It's about that. One cannot separate that vision from a theology. Theology is speech about God, theologos, it is speech about God. But what is God? God should not be this, what I call the giant daddy with a toga sitting on a throne somewhere. Those are images that we had as children. They were good. They were good. It's like Santa Claus. They gave us a little bridge into what it means to be an adult. But now that we are no longer children, we must have an equally grown-up adult idea of God. What is God? The scriptures tell us that what God is ecstasy, ecstasis, pouring out. God says in the book of Genesis, God wants to be God by creating. God creates ecstasis. It comes out of God. So you could ask me, well, what does ecstasy look like? I don't know. I actually barely know what it feels like. Once in a while, even when Moses is sneezing at me, I think of it as a small moment of ecstasy because that creature and I connect so deeply. And I can't imagine how impoverished my life would be without him in my life. Since we are in the land of the Buddha and everything. So once in a while, I call him Buddhu. Those of you who know Sanskrit will know what I'm saying. So Buddha with the A at the end is the enlightened one. Buddhu is the unenlightened one. I know he wouldn't mind me speaking like this about him. God is ecstasy. God is love. God is always joining. God is always connecting. God is always present. That is why there is that assurance, when I am gone, I will leave you a helper who will be with you always. Instead of daddy God, mommy God, punishing God, wicked God, terrifying God, fearful God, think of the God that will be with you. Doesn't matter what you're going through. That God is there. That is the assurance. That is the tradition. This story, Francis' story about the worms and his actual doing of saving a worm, is an example of thinking theologically. If we lived in a world where we would never be anxious, never be afraid, never worry, because God's self is with us at every time, each moment, in our living, in our breathing, in our doing, in our dying. Then it would be a different world. That was the point. But we misunderstood it, and we decided someone needed to be punished. And what we see on the cross is that, not something wrought by God, something wrought by human beings. It is our hate, our anger, our lack of imagination about God. So the church traditions, and I say traditions in the plural, preserve these stories of connection, of interdependence, because theology, the entire apparatus of it, I have all those words up there for you, the entire apparatus of it, God, Jesus, Trinity, creation, humanity, sin and salvation, church, eschatology. Now, these words are like nursery rhymes to me now. This is what I live and breathe every day. This is what this apparatus of thought is what Christian theologians do. Now, for a lot of people, all these are kind of off-putting words. They're, who cares? Eschatology. Who cares? Trinity, mumbo jumbo. But what they are, really, each and every one of them, attempts to understand how we are interpenetrating connected. God isn't over there. God is here with us, interbeing with all of us. I would just ask you to think about this story. I love this story. I talk about this story all the time because there is no Christian theology if we can't think of worms and snakes. That is a shocking statement. Years ago, I irritated a bunch of my students. I don't say it like that anymore. You know, once in a while you need to be shocking, but the way I said it was this. When I die, that was the irritating part. When I die and get to heaven, that was the very irritating part. When I die and get to heaven, if that little kitten that I loved 10 years ago, and now Moses, little dog, if they're not there, I'm leaving. So what does that say about us human beings? What does that say about, is your heaven bereft of animals? Is your heaven empty of the things that we loved that actually made us human? Which brings me to the other very big question. So who is in heaven, or what is in heaven? Here's the very shocking answer. Your enemy. They're there in heaven. They will be there in heaven. And you might ask, why? My enemy? But that little, no good, whatever, was loved by someone, maybe a dog. And they were saved. And they will be there. And you will be there. And all the people that ever lived, including the worst of the worst, because they were already saved. It's terrifying, no? Because we live in our thought with all these complex ways of here's the good I do, here's the bad I do, credit and debit, and I will earn my way to heaven. Your God already loves you. There is a place waiting for you. A mansion has been made and there is a room for you. You will be there with your God. So the tradition preserves these stories. What do you think about worms? Have a conversation for about 3 minutes. Okay. So thank you again for all this energy. This is wonderful. We are invoking the spirit to be with us in this room. Well, as I wait for questions from the audience, I have one here, but maybe I'll have a couple more, then I can choose. Let me tell you about something that happened to me about 18 years ago now. So I began as a very junior professor here in the United States anyway. I had taught before in India, but in the US, my first job was at a liberal arts university, St. Bonaventure University in Western New York. Some of you may know the Bonnies. They were very, very famous in the 70s for being a basketball college. They still hold on to that idea with some stress there. Yeah. Well, at Bonaventure in those years in the 70s was men's, I think. Yeah, so it wasn't so much women's, but the women's team right now is also very good. In any case, so I began my teaching in the US over there. For some reason, they decided that I'd be very good with remedial students at some point. So after a year, the dean stuck me in a class of 12 supposedly irredeemable students. I was told these words, they are irredeemable, you do whatever you want with them, just get them through, okay? So I walk into this classroom, now I could talk about each one of those students. Each one of them I remember, and each one of them had something very interesting that I learned by being in their presence. But I want to talk about one. I won't talk about this person's gender or race or class or anything, but I will tell you this. You know how when one is in an audience, and this might have happened to all of you, you're looking out at the audience and suddenly you see a face that is so striking, that is so beautiful, that is so distracting that all you can do is don't look over there because you'll stare. The student was that way. Drop dead gorgeous, one of them. And as a professor, you know, already one is crossing all kinds of lines by even thinking these things, right? So I don't want to look at you. I'm not looking at you. I'm going to not pay attention to you, but they demanded attention by the way they looked. It was a film star in the making. The problem was, I'm so sorry about this stereotype. The problem was, striking as they were to look at, the lights were not on. I don't know how else to say it. That was the situation. So in that classroom, most of the time, my time was taken up by walking up and down, scolding them for not transcribing what was on the board into their notebooks. Yes, it was that level. One would think, college, how did they ever get there? I don't know either. But that's why the dean stuck me there. I never thought of myself as someone with an extraordinary amount of patience, but patience is what I learned over there. Literally, I would walk up and down. Did you copy that sentence on the board? Just copy it, transcribe it from the board into your book, and we are doing good. So this student heard me talk about Francis and the worm. Now, I don't know again how I'm being perceived here, but when I'm at full throttle, I can tell a story. I can tell a story and everybody's sitting there like with their mouths open. That's what happened in that classroom. Everyone's sitting like, what? The worm, the fool, the saint, Francis. So I thought I thought I did a great job. I'm doing such a great job as a teacher by telling the story. I have invoked the tradition. I have made the tradition alive. I am a success. I picked up the snake. You see, that was the snake. I picked up the snake. So the snake, being a wild animal and who is not given to, these monkey types, lifting them up, they do not like it. Don't do that to them. Bit me. This is what happened. The student exercised my patience to such a level that at the end of class, at which point I gave them a C. Now, a C is a strategic grade, okay? I don't know if any of you know this, but it's a very strategic grade. They're clearly not an A student. They're clearly not a B student. B is for all the ones that actually put in a lot of effort. If you just sat there looking beautiful and asked dumb questions, no, that is not a B. But you don't give them a D, because if they get a D, then they can retake the class. So you give them a C, by which they have to leave. So I thought I saw the end. I saw that, that was it. I was not being a very good teacher. I was being impatient. I told you, I picked up a snake. I was so thankful when they left because they tried me. I mean, I think I grew like 15 gray hair in my head and a whole other bunch fell out. They left and that was it. I didn't spend another minute thinking about them. Except August 8th that year, it would have been 2004, maybe. 2004, I get an email out of the blue from that student, in which that student said, Dr. Abraham, were your ears burning yesterday? Like, no, and why are you writing to me? We're done, no love lost between us. Well, I was at a wedding. My cousin was getting married, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what? Long email. So I'm trying to read through it and thinking, why? What has happened? My cousin got married yesterday. And in Buffalo, so Bonaventure is near Buffalo, it gets all kinds of precipitation. And the heavens opened and it was raining cats, dogs, monkeys, and elephants. And it was so wet that the wedding, which was to be held outside, everybody ran inside. And the student was among the bridal party. They were in the bridal party. And the student said, I looked out and I thought of you because I saw all these worms come out of the lawn. And I said to everybody, student, I'm speaking in my student's voice, I said to everybody, my teacher, Dr. Abraham said, we have to save the worms. So the student made everybody go out with umbrellas and pick up each worm and put them back in the lawn. So I'm reading this on August the 10th or something, August the 8th, and I'm reading this and I'm thinking, oh my God, I lost the entire lesson. You know, it was raining today. The worms were coming out. Why? They can drown and die. When my student put the worms back in the lawn, the student committed genocide. You see, I picked up the snake and it bit me. It was revealed to me that I was not a very good teacher, and that my ability to tell a story with bells and whistles and flourishes was actually a distraction. They didn't hear. I did something very wrong. My student also picked up the snake, because anything can be the snake. But in doing so, my student killed the snake. So here's the fragility of life. Here's the fragility of all of our actions. Here's the fragility of everything we aspire to, dream about doing, think about doing. If you pick up the snake, it will either bite you or you will kill it. And neither is the path of the gateless barrier. For the gateless barrier to be activated, we have to let the snake be the snake. We have to let the worm be the worm. This is why in the East, you know, there is a certain acceptance about the cycle of life. In their hurry to save the worms from death, the student actually committed a worse death. We can let things die, whether it is our churches or our academic institutions or our theologies or our ideas about God, love, whatever it may be, we can let them die. Because if we don't, it will either bite us or we will kill it. Now, over the years, I have thought about this story, and even as I say, thinking is not a good thing. The story it's become part of my being in the world. Wherever I go, I ask myself a question. How am I going to pick up the snake today? Because whatever it is, whether it is meeting a friend or being with Bishop Laurie or being with you all, I can pick it up wrong and it will bite me. Or worse, I will kill it. There is no program though. There is no blueprint. There is no series of things that we can do so that this doesn't happen. All that there is to ask the question, but how are you doing it and why are you doing it? If it is for my ego, if it is for my sense of, oh yay, I performed well today, or if I want all these kudos and accolades, or the opposite, which is I'm really useless. I don't know how to do anything. I have feelings of inferiority. People always ask me, how do you speak in public? Because they hate to do it. I say, I hate to do it myself. You have no idea. I get sick thinking about it. All of it is picking up the snake. All of it is standing at the gateless barrier. All of it is either listening or not listening to the Spirit. So I don't have a blueprint. I don't know what to say. other than that moment, I realized how poor a teacher I was. I think I understood what it means to be a teacher. So I have a question in there for you. How do we teach teachers to teach? We think about it, we think of it as plans and programs and 5-year plans. And this is how you should, here's the plan. Do it this way. But wisdom is not that. Wisdom is something else entirely. It is beyond words. It is beyond plans. It's beyond this reality. That is what it means to be spiritual. I had one question that came here. If you have others, do send them up. How do you respond to people who disparage church and religion or institutionalized religion, but then offer a justification by saying they are spiritual? Well, Bonhoeffer talked about the religionless Christianity. And what is that? What does it mean to be religionless? And let them disparage all they want. It's not their church and it's not my church. In the end, it's the church of God. God can take care of all that. Let them. That's okay. They are projecting. One has compassion for that. But if there's anything I would like to leave you with is the question of a practical spirituality for our world today in VUCA moments. I just want one thing. If we are to imagine that VUCA is something that is so unusual and relevant to our times, well, there's the snake again. Human beings and this planet have always faced peril. And we have created stories and consolations that come to us from other places, other times, and other spaces. We've faced them before. This is not the first time the plague has hit us. This is not the first time human beings will look back and say, we survived it. I remember when COVID first started, folks around me would say, it's the first time, in my lifetime, that we've had an epidemic or a pandemic. Have we forgotten AIDS? Have we forgotten SARS? I mean, what privilege allows us to forget? We lived with them, people survived, people lived, and people told stories. So all I have to say really is, if there are no questions, and I think I'm in time, almost, don't pick up snakes. We don't want them to bite you, but more than anything, we don't want to kill them. But do enjoy the worms. The worms were out today. Some of them were dying, it's okay. Thank you.
Do you see why I love and admire this theologian? It is 9:55. Let's take a 15-minute break. Be back at 10:10. And if you're in your seat, the Joy team may have something for you. See you in 15 minutes.
last thing I want to happen.
Okay.
And then you're good to go. I just
I've got the joy, 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 joy. Where? Where? Delightful. What do you call a factory that makes okay products? A satisfactory. All right, as you are stretching your legs, reach down into your name tag and find your raffle ticket. 9968275. 68275. I don't see a lot of you looking at your raffle tickets. You could have one of these fabulous prizes.
The Powell's gift card.
A Powell's gift card. All right, how about 9968192? 192. How about 9968283? How about 9968218? Woo! Come on up. Come on up. We have these lovely prizes here. And I will put that aside. How about 9968098? Nine nine six eight 203. 203, come on up. Woo! Delightful. Vicky is going to lead us in a counting exercise.
So we've been sitting for a while this morning. And so this is an opportunity to move your body a little bit. You can sit or you can stand up, however you're comfortable. And we're going to start slow, counting up to 5, and then we'll count back down. And each of your limbs gets a count. So it starts like this. 1, 1, 1, 1. Remember to get the wrists, elbows, shoulders, ankles. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Count with me here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1.
More apples? We have 2 things? All right, now that you are making your way back to your seats after stretching, delightful, 9968090.
Lovely original art by Deacon Sue Best.
Lovely original art by Deacon Sue Best. How about 9968336? We got a winner! We have another gift card. So that'll be 9968170. 170. How about 9968169? Woo! Come on up. My dad refuses to buy anything with Velcro. He says it's a total ripoff. So if you look at this beautiful wall, there are several rebus puzzles there. And if you fill out the form that is at your table, please turn it in because we will be announcing the winner at dinner tonight. Woo!
Thanks to the Joy team. I'd like to give special thanks to Pastor Leah Stoltz-Dorfler and Pastor Curtis. Why am I blanking on Pastor Curtis's last name? Zeski, that's right. Thank you. Brain moment. Those two donated the $50 Powell's gift cards in memory of Shelley Willem. So let's give them thanks. It was her yearning before she died far too early that a significant donation to Lutheran Community Services Northwest in her name be made to serve Afghan refugees. And that money will also partly go to serve that. And that will join in our offering tomorrow morning. So thanks so much. And thanks to all who donated these prizes. They're quiet and fun. And thanks for joining in that spirit.
And now, with yet more joy, I am happy to present the first of our videos celebrating the anniversary of ordination for rostered leaders celebrating 25 to 45 years in ministry.
Congratulations to all of these leaders, some of whom have formed some of us in deep and important ways. Thanks also to Sonia Zeski and Gary Eppelsheimer, who put those videos together. Are they gorgeous? Now it's my honor and pleasure to introduce our churchwide representative, Judith Roberts. She is part of the ELCA churchwide leadership, serving 3.5 million Lutherans in very different contexts across the United States and also into the Caribbean. Her title is Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and she is responsible for articulating and champion a comprehensive approach and vision for diversity and equity and inclusion within our church. Judith is the former ELCA Director for Racial Justice and co-convener for the National Council of Churches Joint Action and Advocacy Working Group, and a task force member of the NCC's Truth and Racial Justice Task Force. She is an alum of Springfield College in Springfield, Massachusetts, and a graduate of the University of Mississippi. She was raised in the Lutheran faith and worships at Grace Lutheran in Evanston, Illinois. Her deep faith and courage comes through when she speaks to the Conference of Bishops, as I've said before, in painfully complicated times, and she becomes in many ways pastor and prophet to the bishops. So please join me in welcoming Judith Roberts.
Well, good morning, everyone. Got my slides up. Yeah, so thank you so much, Bishop Lori. Churchwide Rep is just part of the portfolio that many of us at the Churchwide organization have the responsibility of carrying as a church of three expressions. And so we gather in assembly, what that means to be church together. But it's also a very privileged position because very few of us actually have the opportunity to do this. Out of a staff of 410 people who represent the Churchwide organization, we have about 20 people who actually attend the 65 Synod assemblies every year. So there's a big responsibility that we have to carry to try to, within a 30-minute or 40-minute window, try to do all of the important things that we do together as church and ministry. So I'm just going to set my timer while I'm up here because I know we're time sensitive and I can go on and on about so much good stuff that we're doing. Just give me one moment. Okay. So just some quick housekeeping just to share with you about the Churchwide office and the 410 folks that I represent in today's conversation with you. We are 65.1% represented in female representation and 34.9% represented in male representation. And we have to follow the guidelines of the Equal Employment Organization when we use those particular numbers, but that is how we break down. When it comes to our racial and ethnic background, we are 64% white and 36% Black, Indigenous people of color. And as we know, the ELCA in the 2014 Pew Research report said that we were the widest denomination, you've already heard this, blah, 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 out of the Protestant denominations in the United States, at 96% representation of white leadership in our church. And so part of our current initiative from Churchwide is to grow younger and more diverse. We want to reach 1 million young new people to serve and to be part of the ELCA community. And so Future Church Initiative, which was launched over a year ago, helped us go on to this path of how are we going to be intentional? How are we going to tap leaders within the organization? What were we going to do that was innovative? Where were we going to put our resources? And that redesign included creating new positions such as mine. So you heard that I came into Churchwide as a director for Racial Justice Ministries. I, at the time, was the only staff person responsible for that portfolio. And through our expansion to kind of get on par with other organizations such as Fortune 500 companies and big institutions that have paid very close attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, we created the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We have a Chief Diversity Officer who is the head of our HR unit, and I serve under her in the Office of the Presiding Bishop. So This work around diversity, as we think more externally about how we're going to do this engagement around the three expressions, and you as congregations are really the leads in making this work happen. 1 million new people are not coming to Churchwide. They're coming through your doors in the congregations. They're coming through the ways that you serve. And so it's really you that's really leading this effort. And I want to give you all credit for the ways that you show up in your hospitality, and the ways that you serve and see and reach your neighbors. And there's work that we have to do internally at the Churchwide organization. 8765 West Higgins is our physical location. And we're doing this remotely. This is the most contact that I've had with other human beings in over 1.5 years. I've spent more time with you in the past day and change than I have with my colleagues. And that's sad, and it's hard. And we're dealing with all the things that everyone else is dealing, life and death, depression, you name it. We carry all of that, and we're doing it at a distance from each other. Yesterday, I said something in conversation in a small group focusing on racial reconciliation. I no longer live in the Evanston, Illinois community. I moved during COVID to a place called Naperville. And I said in yesterday's conversation that I'm in this new community and I wanted to go to church on Easter. And I looked on the website at one of our larger congregations in that town. And there was not one person of color on the website. And so I made another decision that day to not go to an ELCA congregation. And I think this was the first time in my life that I chose to not be in my own community. And I've got some notes. It was painful for me to share that because there's so much hurt when we think about a denomination that is less than 10% people of color. And as the director for racial justice, I hold a lot of stories. I know a lot of pain. I know a lot of inequities in our church because we're not perfect. And I went home, looked back to my cabin last night, and I didn't sleep because I felt like, how could I have said that? But I'll tell you where I did go. I went to an AME community, an African Methodist Episcopal congregation. And as you know, we're called to be in relationship with the historic Black church community. I went there because I went there with a friend. One of the assistant pastors is a good friend of mine. And she said, why don't you come to my church with me? And I needed to be at that place at that time on that Sunday. And what I didn't know during the service is that that was the congregation of Sandra Bland. And I saw a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. And for those who don't know about Sandra Bland, she was a young African-American woman who was detained by police in Texas because she failed to use a blinker. And a few days later, she was found dead in her cell during police custody. And so I think about the church without walls. And I think about my communities, plural, and what it means for me to serve and to be raised in a Lutheran tradition and to be part of ecumenical movement work for justice and the different ways we all get to show up. And then the Spirit spoke to me more specifically. Wednesdays at ELCA, virtually, we have worship service. Our colleagues from all across the 65 Synod serve. We're readers, we're preachers, we're in the choir. That's my church too. We're really a church of three expressions. And I haven't found my new church in Naperville, but I have my church family, which is my colleagues who are not just Lutheran, who are not just Christian, who feed this church, love this church, serve faithfully in this community. And you may never ever get to know them or meet them, but we're part of this bigger body. So I just want to acknowledge that. And I want to thank the hospitality of every person who's reached out to me since I've been in this space today. The gift bags, the greetings, the hugs. I got a hug last night. There are huggers in this room. I needed to feel that love and that compassion, that I was heard in a place where we're talking about a lot of pain and a lot of trauma that is baked into this nation. And it reflects itself in many ways in institutions. And it shows up in our interpersonal interactions with each other. But we've got the greatest witness of all, the wounded healer, that showed us nothing but love. That's it. And if I can just remind myself every day why I'm here, the why, and I get to choose how I tend to show up. And sometimes that's speaking the hard truths. Is that okay? You know? And I know the reality is that nobody really likes change except crying babies. I know that. Right? But the Spirit is stirring and casting new seeds and doing something new that none of us can prepare for really fully. Just embrace it. It's going to be all right. Amen. So you heard a little bit about my background. That picture was taken pre-COVID, 15 pounds. So that's a little vanity. It's one of the only few photos I still have. But, oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I am the parent of Julian, who is an amazing young adult who is raised in this church, shaped by the elders in my home congregation of Christ the King in Connecticut, where I experienced Christ as a kindergartner in Sunday school and became a member of that congregation in youth choir and all the different things that I did. And I served as a council member and as a lay assistant in my church. Became a member of the ELCA Church Council, and I served with then Secretary David Swartling. And then I stepped off of council and became a part of the Churchwide organization. So this journey, where at times I don't always feel prepared or called, but God is faithful in all the things. And you see my favorite text is still there, Romans 8:38 through 39. That is the truth that sets me on my path every day, that nothing can separate us from the love of God. So we can go to the next slide. I know I could cover a lot of conversation in this time, but I definitely have to get to some business that's important about what happens from Churchwide, why it's important that we're here. And I want to thank this Synod on behalf of all of the members and the leaders in the communities that are touched by your support, that $388,057 were committed to help serve the ministry of the ELCA. And I want to thank you. I want to give yourself a round of applause for doing that in the midst of COVID, right? Because when it happens here with Bishop saying that retaining staff was possible, it's the same thing that happens for the 400 plus colleagues that I serve with every day at Churchwide. Able to keep the lights on, we're able to make mission and ministry continue to happen with over $40 million that this church faithfully gave in the year 2021. So we are grateful and thankful for every penny that is given to this church and all the ways that people are serving and lifting up the name of Christ. And so we can go to the next slide. So when we give in our congregational settings, we're supporting ministry right where we are. And a portion of that goes to support the Synod. And a portion of the Synod's offering goes back to Churchwide. And then Churchwide, we have priority work that I'll share briefly with you about how that money is distributed, but it comes right back here to the Synod. Next slide, please. So here's the breakdown of what mission support dollars look like. So when Churchwide receives that offering from our 65 synods, we commit 41% of that to continue to grow the ELCA. That's in our communications, that's in planting congregations, supporting existing ministries. 22% goes through our work that we do through global mission, our missionaries, the work that we do with Lutheran World Federation, our ecumenical work, the work we do through international disaster relief. And then 37% is committed to growing new leaders in our church. We can go to the next slide. So the mission support that remains here in your Synod is vital to the work that you do on the day-to-day basis. It's walking with congregations. It's accompanying folks through the ministry call process itself. It's starting new congregations. Next slide. And in the middle of a pandemic, this Synod birthed Cully Neighborhood Outreach, the Mid-Wilmette Valley, sorry, my glasses, I don't need these to read that, Latino Outreach, Queer Enough, Story Dwelling, Storyline Community, and Together Lab in the midst of a pandemic. Amen. And this Synod is working with Leading for Change, bringing together think tanks of clergy, lay, rostered leaders who are thinking about vitality strategies. What can we learn from each other? What can we do better together? And Holy Innovations in Oregon is a multi-synod project for learning that will benefit all churches. We're learning to lead in a different way and unleashing and harnessing the collective genius by discovering new and useful ministry innovations. Next slide. And Fund for Leaders Scholarship. We'll wait for the next slide to come up. Fund for Leaders Scholarships is a campaign that was started by Churchwide to assist our seminary leaders with full tuition scholarship. Amen. And within this Synod, we have Charlotte Trent, who has received a full Fund for Leaders Scholarship, going to Wartburg Theological Seminary. Susan Johnson, who's received a Synod scholarship. So your Synod is also matching funds to help foster leadership development, going to Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary, PLTS. And Andrew Langford, who's also received a Synod scholarship from your dollars, what you do right here in this Synod to raise and support leaders. So you're making leaders, amen. So not only are you raising money for Fund for Leaders to help offset educational costs, educational debt is a big issue that we continue to look at from the church-wide perspective. We've just created a new, I'm trying to get a task force, that's the word I was looking for, to think about how we're funding and supporting leaders throughout their entire time of service who happen to go to seminary and serve in congregational life, because we know that educational debt has not gone down. And we have leaders that will not be able to retire fully, who've been faithful servants of this church. And we want to explore and find out where those gaps are. So the Fund for Leaders is trying to do work on the front end, so we don't have more leaders coming out with six-figure plus skyrocketing debt for seminary. We're doing the best we can to help curtail that. So in addition to working with our Fund for Leaders and scholarships, we can go to our next slide. Your Synod, this Synod, Oregon Synod, is also sponsoring missionaries. Say Naomi, and I apologize if I can't pronounce this correctly, Spellholm, okay, is serving in her country of Central Europe. And in addition to our missionaries that spend time in service, we have young adult leaders who are serving through Global Mission, and they're called YAGMs. We're raising plenty of young adults who give a year of their service, doing various programs across the globe, around the globe. Next slide, please. So in 2021, we also raised dollars through the World Hunger, and it supported a variety of projects and programs around the world and across the ELCA, including work in food security, agriculture, income generation, health, housing, education, peace and reconciliation efforts, migration, gender justice, human rights, and much, much more. 286 ELCA World Hunger grants were provided internationally to support the work of companion churches, organizations, and ecumenical partners in 66 countries, with a total international expenditure of over $14.5 million. And 167 ELCA World Domestic Grants and 4 Big Dream Grants and 36 Daily Bread Matching Grants were awarded across 63 synods with a total award of over $1.25 million. And right here in this synod, we have Cully Neighborhood Outreach. Oh, next slide, please. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Excuse me, Cully Neighborhood Outreach, Nativity Lutheran Church, Portland Rescue Mission, Village, Storyline Community, Zion Lutheran Church, and Zion Lutheran Church received a Big Dream grant. Next slide, please. Sorry. Okay. I'm sorry, can we go back one slide? I'm not sure if there was a slide out of order. Oh, no, it's okay. I'm missing a slide. It's okay. So Lord, the Lutheran Disaster Response Team, we know that they're there for the long haul. We know that organizations such as American Red Cross are immediate kind of, sandals on the ground doing immediate response work to national disasters and international disasters. But Lutheran Disaster Response is here for the long haul, the long term, for those who worked in disaster response, that, beyond the immediate need, communities need to rebuild. And LDR has been responsible for leading this work across our country and globally. In 2021, Lutheran Disaster Response responded to disasters in 47 countries and 17 US states and territories, and was made possible by over 15 million in gifts by the ELCA members and supporters. And right here in this Synod, over 122,000 of those dollars were raised right here for support here. Yes, thank you. And those responses in the last year included major disasters, primarily tornadoes and wildfires. Excuse me, I'm having difficulty this afternoon. Primarily tornadoes, wildfires, and severe storms, as well as international response for the Haitian earthquake, or the earthquake in Haiti. In addition to work happening here in the United States, humanitarian response continues to assist those who are being impacted by the issues in the Ukraine, the crisis in the Ukraine. We are working with refugees who are fleeing to places like Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania, and supporting them with temporary shelter, cash assistance, hygiene kits, medical care, and psychological support. Next slide, please. We also created a COVID response fund. Many of our congregations who are assisting members in community have been able to respond with financial donations to assist folks. We've had spikes in homelessness because of the pandemic. We've had spikes with food insecurities and our pantries needing more support. And so the COVID-19 response fund has been one way that we've been able to raise funds to be distributed for those specific needs. Next slide. And today, we celebrate the Evangelical Church of the Augsburg Confession in Poland. Yes, last week, actually a week ago, on the 7th of May, 9 women in this church were ordained into ministry, full-time ministry. So we are grateful for that. What a blessing. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just highlight a few resources that were produced over the last year and great work that is happening across the ELCA to honor and remember the justice work that we lead with. So Faith and Sexism is our most recent ELCA social statement. It is now available online. There are videos that accompany this particular resource, and it was designed to give us a gender justice framework to the work that we are called to do together. So please if you haven't had a chance, please check out the 6-session guide. It encourages participants to engage in the social statement and to take actions. The sessions are interactive and they usually are about 45 to 90 minutes varying, with options for in-person gatherings as well as interactive virtual meetings or discussions. In the middle is the Now is the Time resource, and that stems from the Declaration to People of African Descent that was also adopted in 2019. The apology calls the church to think about the complicity of slavery and how racism remains in our own institutions. And it brings us to the conversation towards reparations. It's not a reparations study. It's helping us think about what does reparations and repair reconciliation work look like. That's the final session of the document. So we encourage you to look at that as well. And in addition, the Declaration of the Evangelical Lutheran Church to American and Alaska Native people was adopted at the Church Council in 2021. And the declaration acknowledges the theological and Christian foundation of the doctrine of discovery, which has codified colonialism and religious intolerance as the societal norms for more than 500 years. This document also calls us to think about not just knowing the history and the pain of First Nations and Indigenous Alaska Native peoples, but how can we be better partners? What is it like to build and be in community and right community with one another? Next slide, please. We've already heard about the great work of mission investment loans, which are vital to expanding ministries in our congregational settings. And I encourage you, if you are not an investor in the mission investment loans, that you'll maybe explore their page and find out all the different ways that you can invest, and think about ways that your congregation may expand your own ministries, such as maybe adding a daycare center for working families, or thinking about upgrading for an industrial kitchen. Next slide. If you haven't explored All Creation Sings, it is our most recent ELCA worship supplemental resource. We continue to think about different ways that we can support mission in these changing times. And this resource includes 200 diverse hymns to enliven worship, an adaptable service of word and prayer, a Spanish-English setting of Holy Communion, and a setting especially appropriate for evening. This worship supplement expands our prayer and song, joining our voices with all of God's creation. And you can learn more about them by visiting Augsburg Fortress. Next slide. Embody the Word will be the next ELCA Churchwide Assembly theme. I hope to see some of you there in Columbus, Ohio from August 8th through the 12th. Next slide. Our roster ministers gathering will be held in Phoenix on July 17th through the 20th. And you can find out more by visiting elca.org. Next slide. Oh, thank you, that's perfect. The ELCA Youth Gathering, we had to postpone the youth gathering for this year, but we are jazzed up, you got the pun, about going to New Orleans. So the Youth Gathering Mile and the Table will be held in New Orleans. The Big Easy is a great place filled with rich history, friendly locals, amazing food, and great music. And we can't wait to get back there. My first time joining Churchwide, we were actually in New Orleans. So I'm looking forward. It's going to be a hot one in July, as you already know, but there's nothing like over 30,000 young people who are interested in serving and praising Jesus. So this is going to be a good time. In addition to the youth gathering, there are two events that lead up to the gathering. The first is the multicultural youth leadership event called MILE, and that helps young leaders of color to meet each other. It's some time for relationship building, time for gathering and sharing with them. In addition to that, the Table, which is formerly known as Definitely Abled Youth Leadership, or DALE, is another pre-event to the gathering that blesses and empowers young people who live with a wide range of physical, cognitive, and emotional disabilities so that they might grow as faithful, wise, and courageous witness for Christ. Next slide, please. So I just want to give a couple of shout outs to leaders here in the Synod who have been so faithful in their service. Deacon Claire Joseph Meyer, are you here? Okay, thank you so much, Deacon Claire Joseph. You were I understand that you were part of the Faith, Sexism, Justice, a Call to Action Study Guide contributing committee member, so we thank you for your leadership. And then we also like to lift up Deacon Claire Joseph Meyer again for the Committee on Discipline. So thank you for the ways that you've served this church. Thank you. I also like to give a special, we can go to the next slide, please. Like to give a special shout out to the directors for Evangelical Mission. They are my colleagues. So part of the work, the ministry that we do is every synod has a director for Evangelical Mission. And their role is so key in helping find ethnic specific multicultural ministry sites as we think about becoming more diverse, that they're able to find the leaders and the communities that we can help expand and grow this work. So Juan Carlos and Melissa, thank you so much for your leadership and your work. And what I also learned about you, Bishop Lori, Where's Bishop Lori? Oh, there you are. There you are. Thank you, Bishop. What I learned about you is that you are part of the 2022 Churchwide Assembly Memorials Committee. So we thank you for the ways that you're going to serve in that capacity, as well as our Ecumenical and Interreligious Relations Committee member. So thank you again for your leadership. And last slide, please. So I just want to thank all of you. Thank you for letting me cry, speak my truth, love on me when I needed it, feed me. I had hazelnuts yesterday. Oh my goodness. I got a little bag to take home. But I just want to thank you for your stories, because this is what gives us life. When we're actually together and hearing and worshiping and fellowshipping with one another. It means so much. And it's hard because when we see our 65 synods, each one unique, each one has its own culture. It's hard until you actually come and meet you, because for the most part, we just get the information on paper about you. We don't get to taste, touch, see what you see. And I've enjoyed my time here. I'm around until this evening. So please come up and connect with me. I have business cards if you'd like to follow up with me with anything. I think I have a couple of minutes I can take. I've got 11 minutes. I could take some questions from you. And if I can't answer it, I will find an answer for you. But if you have anything you'd like to ask me while I'm here, please feel free to do so. Yes. How are we doing with recruitment in terms of African American and other communities? Well, I can tell you about the experience I had at LSTC because I was with them. We have a document called the Strategy Towards Diversity, which was passed in 2019. And the document was written by Black, Indigenous people of color in this church who said they have ideas about how we can grow the denomination. So LSTC, Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago, hosted an event last month. And it was very telling. It was very telling about where we are in terms of relationship with communities of color, like how can we do better? As you know, I'm just going to use Chicago as the example. It's one of the most diverse places in this country and is one of the most segregated cities simultaneously. And so part of this relational piece that came up in conversation is that we don't want the seminary to feel like they're on an island by themselves. What kind of relationships can they build so they can do that kind of outreach and build trust with people who are finding their call into ministry? We also looked at the economics. That's a big part when we talk about debt, why and how people go to seminary. What I didn't name was theological education for emerging ministry. If you know about TEAM, can you raise your hand? Okay, so folks who don't know about theological education for emerging ministry it's a certificate program that creates a pathway for a non-traditional seminary leadership on your way to the roster. And so for leaders of color, many of us can't take a year off if we are feeling a call later in a second career for us. We can't just take a year off and uproot and go to seminary. Theological education has been a powerful pathway for many of our leaders of color to do that. They can stay where they are. They can continue to work full time, support families, right? And then they go off to our different seminaries that are designated sites to do their education. So it may be once a month that they have to go and do either a course online, virtually, or they may have to physically go to a place. But it's become a way for us to help expand the pool for our leaders. I would say the last piece, it's really around the call process. The second thing that we're examining is the length of time for first call. What we know currently is that women of color, Black women in particular, tend to wait longer for first call. So I have sat with leaders, this is part of the pain. I was with a person who is preparing to go into a congregation, and she has been out of seminary waiting almost for her year. And the bills don't stop, right? And so what needs to happen in our system so leaders believe that they're really truly called to serve the entire church? What's happening to them? So we've got people coming in, but if there isn't a place for them to go, what happens? So that's some of the deeper dives. And I hope I'm not taking too much time to explain this, but the reason why we're looking at the debt piece is that we have leaders, and I'm going to talk specifically about the women of color who share their story, who are at the poverty level right now, serving. Their congregations are not able to meet Synod guidelines, and they're dealing with trauma. They're not getting the time off that they need. They're burnt out. So we've got some work to understanding those systemic inequities, but thank you for asking. So there's some hope. There are things that we're trying to do around engagement. There's things we can do better relationally, right? And there's some things we got to fix in the system, but we want to do our due diligence. That's why we have the task force to look at the educational debt. How's it really impacting all people, not just that particular segment, but we want to see the bigger scope that we've got many leaders who are drowning in debt. And if they're not healthy, how can they be healthy in a congregational setting? So we're looking at all of that. We're looking at the emotional, psychological impact of that. Another question? Yes, please.
What is at least one thing that Oregon congregations could do to support your office?
Oh, wow. Well, I appreciate that question. It's our church together, right? We're all in ministry together. So when we all really feel like this is our work together, that makes the biggest difference, right? And I think sometimes Bishop Eaton is kind of, looked to, or perhaps Bishop Lori, you're looked to as the Synod bishops to be the only voice that speaks out on injustices. But we have an opportunity every Sunday in our congregational life when we preach and we teach to engage. We have an opportunity to build relationships with marginalized communities every day. We have an opportunity to share our resources in partnership and collaboration. So I think the more that we do, the more we love on each other in some intentional ways, right? The more that we can help grow this thing. Because we're doing great work. I can think of congregations that have diversity that come in the door, but people don't stay. So what do we got to do to help change that part of the equation, right? Is it in the images? Is it in the hymns that we sing? Whatever it is, let's open the doors and think and learn together and go together. So thank you for that question. But I think, we can all own our part because this is our work, God's work, our hands that we're called to do. Anything else? Oh. To gather information? Wow. So I know the team that would fall under. That's CCL, which is Christian Community and Leadership. That's their side. I actually have a meeting with them, with their executive director. We're meeting in 2 weeks. Bill Hirsch is his name. I can ask that question about and review what it currently looks like. So I can't say if they're making any changes, but his team that's where they're moving towards. That's why I'm coming into the conversation with them. So maybe I can bring your idea back. If we can have a one-on-one, I can make sure to capture that. Thank you. Anything else? Well, y'all have been easy on me. This is fine. I was worried, I told Bishop, I said, Bishop, I don't know if I can answer all the questions. I'm not an expert. I'm not at the top of the organizational chart there. So I don't know all the answers, but y'all have just been gracious with me, and thank you. Oh, yes, one more? Yeah. Well, right, that's the elephant in the room. My guess is that the way that I see church growth, it's probably going to be more communities that are developing in less congregational life together. I'm excited about some of the mission developers that are just reaching people where they are, and doing some really creative things around ministry. And I'll just throw one example out. Like there's a group that they're hiking together, and they're just engaging folks who are exploring what it means to even be a follower of Christ, because not everybody has that language and that knowledge. So I think we're going to have to really do a lot of work on tooling up. What does it mean to engage non-traditional Lutheran experiences? I met Jesus, as like I said, as a 5-year-old at Christ the King in the congregation, but that's not where many of us are going to be. So I'm excited about leaders that can bring that kind of vision forward. So, one more. Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, COVID is kind of delayed a lot of stuff. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I was just going to say, I don't know. I feel like there's been such a disconnect over the past 2 years about what leaders are doing. I can tell you one thing I do know of, like Vacation Bible School, that is back in certain places, right? And that's one way that leaders, there's a particular model I read about recently, one of our ELCA leaders, that they're equipping young leaders to be the leaders of the VBS work, right? And so that's giving them that space to be leaders. And to your point about like having fun and having youth groups, I was a youth leader. That's what I did. So I assume that's kind of what all congregation young adult leaders do. The last quick plug is Extravaganza. That's a ministry that's strictly related to younger leaders of our church. It's called Extravaganza, and it's an annual event. I don't know if there are other leaders who've attended Extravaganza, but definitely check them out and find out what are some innovative ways that we're changing church. Bishop, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, everyone, again.
Judith Roberts is a phenomenon, and she's only with us a few more hours. So track her down if you'd like to spend even a bit of time with her. Thanks to Amanda Zenzalo, who is preparing us to do resolutions. We will be having the Joy Committee come up in a moment for a 5-minute interlude. Do not move unless your body needs it, and then move, please. It's also come to my attention that we have a voting member who's been rushed to the hospital this morning, I think. And we don't know. Karen Haynes from Astoria. And it looks as though, well, just let's pray. Could we? Good and gracious God, you are wounded healer. And so we ask that you pour your spirit into our sister Karen and into the hands and minds of all who are treating her at the local hospital. Grace her with comfort and confidence and the strength of your healing power, and bring her back to us quickly. Ground us in your healing and your life. In the waters of Christ we pray. Amen. And let's, if you have your mask closed, let's sing. There should be a fourth microphone. There should be. Oh, here's one. Seems like all my spirit songs are falling on, I'm just out of touch, but come, Lord Jesus, send us your spirit, renew the face of the earth. All right, few people know it, so sing with me loud. And we can enfold Karen in a blanket of prayer as we sing. Come, Lord Jesus, send us your spirit, renew the face of the earth. Come, Lord Jesus, send us your spirit, renew the face of the earth. One more time. Come, Lord Jesus, send us your spirit, renew the face of the earth.
Joy people, I invite you to come forward.
And don't forget to visit the joy table and fill out a heart. We'll be praying prayer partners, congregation to congregation, but we can't do that if your congregation doesn't come forward.
Hi, Joy team. I just want to check this microphone, but to do it, I'm going to say hello to you. You're doing so great. I think your jokes are awesome. You know what? This microphone works too, and that's super awesome. How cool is that?
I think it's so cool. I'll share another joke with you.
Yes!
Last night, my wife and I watched two movies back to back. Fortunately, I was facing the TV.
That's a knee slapper. You know what helps when you're using a microphone like this? When you talk into it and you like put your mask on it. So when people are coming up to the microphone and they bring their masks with them, and then they like lean into the mic and get close enough that like the mask almost touches it so everyone can hear them when they're speaking yes to the motion or no to the motion. Isn't that cool information?
That's so cool. You know what's also cool? I have this habit of trying to look around at the audience while I am talking, but if I do that and talk over here and over here, you don't hear all of it. So all your voice goes here, we know you're talking to all of us.
And actually, if they're talking at these mics, they are supposed to talk to the chair only.
Okay.
So they need to talk to the bishop. Talking right to the bishop the whole time, just to the bishop and only the bishop. Mic straight at the face. Thank you for this moment of microphone etiquette.
Also remember to say your name and your congregation, and in your name tag is also your raffle ticket. Great transition, I know. 9968264. 264. Woo! Come on up, come on up. You have the option of beer and finding 5 friends, or a mug.
All the beer.
And then I will hand the microphone to Vicky.
Now that we know about microphone etiquette, a quick moment while we've been sitting for a while, think about your own posture in your body. Think about your feet sitting on the ground, ankles above your knees. Are your shoulders back? Imagine a string from the top of your head going up to the ceiling. And we're going to take a couple of deep breaths where you should feel your whole sort of belly inflate. Big one, hold it for a second, and then let it out. We're going to do it again. Nice big one. And let it out. Shake out your shoulders a little bit, a little neck roll. Okay, and we'll hand it back to Madam Chair.
Thank you, Joy Committee. Thank you. As we prepare to engage these resolutions, which come to you from all over the Synod, just want to give you a little bit of, we had microphone etiquette, amendment etiquette. You've read already that we will not spend a lot of time amending the whereas clauses, that's background far less important than the therefore be it resolved clauses. Does that make sense? Those are the clauses we act upon. So let's not go down the wormhole of amending amendments on the whereases, or we really will be here till midnight. Let's focus for the most part on the be it resolves. And if you insist that some whereas clause needs an amendment, we will do it after the resolved clauses. We also wish to ask that if you have an amendment, put it in writing, sign your name and your congregation, and present it to our secretary, Sue Best, so that it could be entered into the minutes and accurately debated. Does that make sense? Oh, thank you. Yes, I love the cards. Yeah, it's time to get out your cards. And there's no form for the amendments. We've been asked, is there a particular form? Write it on any scrap of paper, a $20 bill, anything that you have in your possession. And that counts. That's good. As we shift to this work, I'd like to introduce Jean Obi, who chairs the Reference and Council Committee for the Oregon Synod and Synod Council.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, my name is Jean Obi. I'm a Synod Council member and I attend Ascension Lutheran Church in Medford. I am chair, thank you. I am chair of our Oregon Synod Assembly Reference and Council Committee. The Synod Council or the Reference and Council Committee screen resolutions and memorials. Our primary role is to see that each resolution is well-written, clear, concise, relevant, and written so that it receives a fair hearing at the Assembly. 6 resolutions will come to you for your consideration. The Reference and Council Committee reviews resolutions and memorials submitted after the deadline as from the floor. The criteria for those are higher. The committee also approves or rejects last-minute handouts or brochures that might be distributed to you during the Assembly. The work of reviewing resolutions is outlined for you in the rules of the Assembly found in your Assembly materials, where you can also find copies of the resolutions and memorials. Please be sure to have your voting cards at hand as we proceed to consider our first resolution.
Thank you, Jean. And before Jean Obi reads the first resolution, I just want to remind you all what we are about here today. We are Synod, walking together, and we're walking together into Christ's outrageous, extravagant, unconditional, and courageous love, which means we will be acting and discerning and speaking out of our deepest values of Christ's grace and justice for all people. So let's remember that even though we may disagree with one another and even not respect the opinions of someone else, we respect each other's personhood. And so we debate with kindness, recognizing, have you heard a theme in all the speakers? That relationship is paramount, and it will lead us into the future if we hold it rightly. So our lenses as we review these resolutions are our faith and our commitments to be connected to a world which is incredibly broken, and a church which is incredibly broken, and both of which are beloved by a God of grace. So in order to efficiently move forward with our consideration of the resolutions and memorials, I ask, as we present each resolution, that one of the makers, and I'm sad that Karen has been ill because she was one of the makers who was prepared to speak to our first resolution. But we ask that one of the makers come to the microphone and be the first to speak on each resolution, and then we will proceed with discussion. Jean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will now present to you our first resolution titled 2022 Resolution on Formation of an Oregon Synod Anti-Racism Resources Network. It will be for your consideration after it is formally moved and seconded. Whereas it has been 29 years since the ELCA adopted the 1993 social statement, freed in Christ, race, ethnicity, and culture. The statement declared racism a sin. The ELCA will model honest engagement on the issues of race, and participation in public life is essential to doing justice. And whereas in recent years, additional statements and commitments have been made to proclaim the ELCA's vision of a community of people who affirm the values of diversity, dignity, compassion, justice, and inclusion. These include 2019 Social Policy Resolution, condemnation of white supremacy and racist rhetoric, which calls for all congregations of the ELCA to engage in communal study of the structures and rhetoric that empower and fuel racism and white supremacy, and take to heart the teaching of scriptures so we may all be better equipped to speak boldly about the equal dignity of all persons in the eyes of God. 2019 Declaration of the ELCA to the people of African descent, which calls for the ELCA to engage in anti-racism and racial justice work. 2019, How Strategic and Authentic is Our Diversity, a call for confession, reflection, and healing action, which states that some synods, associations, and congregations within the ELCA have shown leadership by developing anti-racism programs, training anti-racism facilitators, and working to prioritize the dismantling of racism within their communities. Yet this should be the work of all entities within the ELCA, not just a few, and that the ELCA should intentionally partner with the Episcopal Church and other full communion, ecumenical, and interreligious partners on justice, anti-racism, and reparations, while also sharing resources and the burden of labor to broaden such work and relationships. And whereas as Lutherans, we understand and affirm that the call to pray and act for racial reconciliation is integral to our witness to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And whereas anti-racism tools, programs, and trainings are essential to help all congregations join the stated work of the ELCA to dismantle racism in all its forms. Therefore, be it resolved that the Oregon Synod sanctions the formation of an Oregon Synod Anti-Racism Resources Network that will be formed, led, and directed by volunteers from member congregations throughout the Synod. The network will share information and offer support for anti-racism education and activities to congregations throughout the Synod to live out the ELCA's commitment to becoming an anti-racist church, and identify educational resources to study and understand the history of white supremacy, racism, systemic racism, and how these evils affect every aspect of our lives together, and encourage congregations within the Synod to engage in ecumenical partnerships in anti-racism education, such as partnering with the Episcopal Church to engage the resource, Sacred Ground, a film-based dialogue series on race and faith, and ecumenical ministries of Oregon's Reckoning with Racism, and assist congregations in ways to use these resources to deepen the commitment toward transformation into a reflection of the inclusive and equitable reign of God, and report back to the Synod on the efficacy of these efforts and progress made toward holding ourselves accountable to our commitment to becoming an anti-racist church.
Thank you, Jean. Oh.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Synod Council has recommended this resolution for consideration.
Thank you so much, Jean. Now I will invite one of the makers of the resolution, Pastor Steve Kienberger, to come to the yes microphone, and he will model with eloquence, as he often does, how one says one's name and congregation and location before one speaks.
Thank you for that gracious reminder, Bishop. Pastor Steve Kienberger, Peace First Lutheran Church in Astoria, Oregon. It is my privilege to speak on behalf of Karen Haynes, who is.
You were right that you need to make the motion first. So move.
I do need to move. Okay, so I make this motion and
it needs a
ask for
second.
a second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Synod adopt resolution number 1. And so now Greg Shea, our Synod Vice President, will begin the timekeeping clock, and Pastor Steve Kienberger will speak to the resolution.
Okay, so it began in our congregation in 2018 with us taking many of the things that have come through the ELCA to us in Astoria, and us asking at our adult forum, how can we be a part of helping our church to become more diverse? And then came Lenny Duncan's book, Dear Church, which our adult forum, from people from 88 years old until 38 years old, were studying. God bless them, because they pushed us. And they listened to Lenny. And one of Lenny's challenges for churches, congregations, was that all leadership should undergo anti-racism training. So our leadership took this to heart, and there we began our search. Where could we find anti-racism leadership training? And the bishop knows, and the synod staff, because we harassed them. We joined Emerge in their cohort against white supremacy, which was also a part. So these are all building stones to us coming to this resolution. But we found a dire need for resources. Reckoning with racism came after the last 2 years. We found this wonderful document from the ELCA, How Strategic and Authentic is Our Diversity, also 2019, in which they had talked about working together with the Episcopal Church. And the Episcopal Church came out with Sacred Ground, which is an amazing tool. And so that is just one of the resources that we're using. And there are many more out there. And so I figure together we can make resources available to all of our congregations. Doesn't matter if you're on the coast, in the center, or outside, and listen and respond to our leadership, our people of color who are asking us, pleading with us to undergo such a study. So I'm privileged to recommend this resolution to this assembly at this time.
Thank you, Pastor. Is there any speaking to this motion? Yes, microphone.
Reverend Solveig Nelson Gooden, Salt and Light Lutheran Church. I speak in favor of this motion. I'm a member of the reparations team, the Synod reparations team, and Karen Haynes. Oh, wow. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Whew. Came to join our team out of this need that Pastor Keenberger named, that they were looking for these resources and having trouble finding it. And we discovered through a lot of back and forth and really good, healthy tension and conversation that there is an overlap between reparations work and anti-racism work, but they're not entirely exactly the same thing. And they're both very necessary. So we, the reparations team, decided that we wanted to co-sponsor this resolution as well, because we see the really strong need for it, in addition to and in support of the reparations work that we are doing.
Thank you, Pastor. Pastor Mark Knudsen.
I'm Mark Knudsen, pastor of Augustana Lutheran Church. I can use 30 seconds of another piece from later now. But I want to speak to this resolution. We're a thriving, multicultural, multinational, multi-generational solar sanctuary congregation called by Christ to work with our siblings, Native American spiritual leaders, Muslim, Jew, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, other people of faith, and people of just goodwill to weave the beloved community, where everyone is welcomed and affirmed for who God created us to be, and where together we work to renew the earth for generations to come. I was at the 1993 assembly with 150 youth leaders. They sat opposite the bishops in those assemblies. We did 5 of those. And a third of those leaders were BIPOC youth. In fact, the youth organization board in 1995, when we left, was the first majority BIPOC board of the Lutheran Church. And those leaders are out there today. The leadership is all around us. And I love this resolution because there are materials that have been created. The difference between materials we were creating then on dismantling racism and now is everybody woke up with the death of George Floyd, Sandra Bland, so many others. This is a Kairos moment in the church to do this and to do it well and be intentional and washing the light. And I have to say, our previous president, one of them, Ann Reyes-Frazee, is a 32-year-old librarian, head librarian at Franklin High School, and she's a national fellow to do this kind of work. BIPOC librarians coming together to say, what are the best resources out there? So I'll offer her name to the work as well. She doesn't know that. But together, this is the moment in time. We can't just keep talking about it and studying about it. We have to take it deep to the heart, as our previous speakers have spoken, and run with it. And I know when we do that together, the church thrives. People want to be part of doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly with God and one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. That's 3 speakers for. And if there's no one speaking against, then debate ends. Right? Yes, sadly so. For a motion. This is a main motion. Remember that, what we heard about yesterday. So it has been moved and seconded that we adopt a resolution regarding the formation of an Oregon Synod Anti-Racism Resources Network. And that is now before us. So ready your cards. If you vote for this resolution, raise a green yes card. Thank you. If you vote no, raise a red no card. If you abstain, a white. Thank you. This resolution passes. Thank you. And you've noticed the timepiece. Is it working or not? Well, Greg's in charge. He'll give you a warning when there's 1 minute left. Worst case scenario, he'll flash his fingers when you have 1 minute. You can do that. And then, so flash, and then this is time's up. So I will again invite Jean Obi to read resolution 2, the second resolution before us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our next resolution is resolution regarding type assembly. Madam Chair, shall I proceed?
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Whereas the cost of in-person Synod assemblies increases each year, and whereas the budgets of many congregations are declining each year, and whereas the environmental impact of hundreds of people traveling across the state to an in-person assembly is substantial, and whereas the pandemic expanded congregational and Synod capacity to successfully navigate online gatherings and the attendance at Oregon Synod assemblies held online in 2020 and 2021 resulted in increased attendance from younger and more diverse individuals. And whereas online gatherings are more accessible to students, caregivers, working people, and many others. And whereas mandatory provision S711 of the Synod Constitution reads, a regular meeting of the Synod Assembly shall be held at least triennially. And whereas bylaw S71101 of the Synod Constitution reads, a regular meeting of the Oregon Synod Assembly shall be held annually. And whereas Oregon revised statutes for not-for-profit corporations requires an annual meeting. And whereas both the Synod Constitution and the Oregon revised statutes allow for electronic meetings. Therefore, be it resolved that the Oregon Synod have an in-person assembly every third year when possible, as dictated by state and national conditions, i.e. state of emergency such as pandemic or other disasters, and an electronic assembly in the other years. Nothing in this resolution precludes the Synod Council of the Oregon Synod from calling a special meeting of the assembly in exigent circumstances as necessary, such as an out-of-sequence bishop election. And be it resolved that the years of in-person Synod assemblies correspond with years in which the bishop elections are held. And be it resolved that a continuing resolution S701A22 be added to the Synod Constitution spelling out the above two be it resolved items. And be it resolved that in years of online assemblies, a Synod Day of Learning be held to supplement the online assembly work with workshops and learning events. And be it resolved that the Oregon Synod budget include a carryover line item that funds Synod Council expenses for assembly, which will be held in a restricted fund for use in the year in which in-person assembly is held. And be it resolved that the congregations of the Oregon Synod also be encouraged to create a carryover fund for the purpose of funding, sending voting members, pastors, and deacons to the in-person and electronic assemblies with the goal of spreading the higher in-person costs over a 3-year period.
Thank you, Jean.
You're welcome, Madam Chair.
This is our one of the 6 resolutions that comes to us from the Synod Council, and so it does not require a second. We will hear first from Greg Shea, who is one of the makers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Synod Council is recommending this to the Assembly because it will do two things. So we have found that during our online assemblies that we can include more people than we would normally. We get a broader diversification, which is not always possible with our onlines because it tends to be that the people that are retired can afford to come. We get a younger representation when we do the online meetings. And primarily, this is a cost-saving measure for your congregations. We have found that it's getting more and more expensive. And by spreading these costs over a 3-year period instead of having to do this every year, we hope that will help you out. It will also help us out because we also send people to assembly. You send 3 typically, we send 25. So it's a big cost to us and a big cost to you. So we hope you will support this motion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Greg. Shay, is there any speaking to this resolution which changes the rhythm of Synod Assembly? If you're opposed, bring a no card. If you are for it, bring a yes.
Hi, I am Pastor Emerson Remy Rimmers from Prineville, Oregon. I do agree that this would be a great way to cut costs, but I worry for congregations like my own that are in rural areas with poor internet access. And I have heard all of us, not all of us, but a lot of us say that we love being together right now and seeing everyone and how that is really important to relationship. And so mainly I am just worried about rural congregations with poor internet access that there might be a deterioration to the relationship with the Synod because.
So Pastor, are you speaking for or against this resolution?
I am speaking for, I don't know. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no.
Got it.
As in a yes and.
Okay.
That I hope that in response to this, if it is passed, that there is attention given to congregations that do not have good internet access, because even though we attended the past 2 assemblies, it was painful for my congregation.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
So, as the good pastor was doing, and I'm doing the same thing. Sorry. As the good pastor is doing, and I'm doing the same thing, I'm expressing a concern. I'm supporting it, but I'm expressing a concern. Is that a green card, a red card, a purple card, a white card?
Parliamentarian? Okay. Okay.
What?
So ideally it would be a white card.
Okay, this is not white.
That's fine. We'll allow you to speak, and then Pastor Aaron Couch. And if you have similar ambiguous emotions and thoughts, bring a white card, but please.
Doug Snell, Our Savior's Lutheran Church, Lebanon, President, Church Council. I support the resolution to meet in person every 3rd year. At the same time, I am concerned that if the in-person meeting is our optimal opportunity, and I submit that it is our optimal opportunity to form fruitful connections as a larger church body, those connections won't occur as frequently or as deeply. I would therefore encourage each cluster, if they are not already, to consider meeting on a quarterly, semi-annual, or annual basis to encourage, support, share successes and failures, collaborate, and grow our collective presence as Christ's servants of love in our communities. I would also encourage the Synod meetings to consider including voluntary cluster reports on successes, failures, common events, and learnings from periodic cluster meetings and ongoing collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. So not an amendment, but a recommendation to keep in mind. Greg? Glenn? Sounds like it. Pastor Couch.
Pastor Aaron Couch, First Emmanuel Lutheran, Portland, Oregon. I have a white card because I have a question. And that is, has Synod Council explored the size of financial benefit
what would this actually mean for congregations across the Synod? And has the Synod Council explored alternative ways of creating and nurturing connection across congregations in the Synod?
Thank you for that question. Greg?
Yes, we have, but I guess the answer is that having these kinds of meetings on an annual basis, I mean, I love being together with all of you as much as everybody, but the cost benefit specifically, I mean, if you think about what it cost for one of you to come today, it was probably in the neighborhood of $1,000 per person by the time you add in all of the, you know, our costs, the hotel costs, extra meals, travel, whatever. So, you know, you're looking at $3,000 per congregation every year. Now, when we did the online meetings, we charged you a nominal fee, I think of 50 cents a head or $50 a head, which does, I mean, we do incur some costs. We have speakers that we pay and other kinds of things. We have people that coordinate all of the online stuff for us that get paid. You know, so there is some cost, but you know, when you average that out over a 3-year period, you're spending $50 a head for 2 years times 3 people or whatever your congregation is allowed. And then you are, you know, versus that $3,000. So it is a huge piece. I mean, the other piece that I didn't mention is there's a huge financial cost in terms of just getting us here. I mean, having people drive from all over the state to get to this arena, the carbon footprint alone is astronomical. You know, it's something in the neighborhood of 9+ tons of carbon dioxide. So I hope that answers your question.
Also, alternate ways of nurturing connection. Thank you. Deacon Sue Best.
Deacon Sue Best, St. Matthew Lutheran Church in Beaverton, and Greg just covered what I was going to talk about. We as a Synod Council take very seriously our responsibility to take care of our environment and the idea of all of us coming. So it was the carbon footprint. I will tell you as an extrovert, I love being here. It sucks to be online to do Synod as the secretary, especially. I gotta tell you, it's not my favorite thing, but it is such a gift to be here. This is relational, right? Zoom is a gift that we use, but I think even in the context of how much I love being here in person, we have to look at all of the costs that we all experience, and especially our creation.
Thank you, Deacon. Pastor.
Pastor John Moss, interim pastor at Calvary Lutheran in Grants Pass, Oregon. I just wanted to say that I had to come to the mic at least once. I do have a reputation. And I speak in favor of this, particularly after sitting in on the hybrid church workshop yesterday. This is a reality that we live with. We talk about we need to make changes, but then when we suggest one, we're not sure we want to. And I think that this is a good way for our church to model what we're doing in congregation, or what we should be doing in congregations as a wider church. And I think it's for us, not against us, and it still maintains collegiality.
Thank you, Pastor Moss. Green Mike.
I'm Paul Kimberly. I'm from Atonement Lutheran in Newport. Boy, it's really hard to follow up those last few comments, but I agree with them a lot. My only thought, as an addition to that, and I carry the white one because I didn't know what I was thinking yet. I still haven't, I'm sure. But you know, as a younger person who is my first time here, this is really invigorating. And I've done a lot of online, you know, modules and other things. Really easy to disengage and just go about your life and have it on. I would say that, you know, I think it would be a great thing considering carbon footprint savings But at the same time, having this kind of gathering, could we do it at maybe somewhere more conducive for the cost instead of, say, Sun River Resort, nothing against them, but we could support Lutherwood and still having a hybrid system there for folks who couldn't afford those years. Just as a thought, something to chew on. Other than that, I'll probably vote yes on this.
Thank you. Now, if we have, are you green or red?
I'm speaking for myself and for the youth. So I am green and red.
Okay.
But it's
So
not,
white maybe, but go, please.
Nicole Poole, St. Paul, Portland. I'm green in the money saving aspect because I know our church struggles, but I am red in the youth voice aspect. I'm going to quote an Oxford study from this year, speaking to ages 20 to 24 youth that were surveyed about virtual gatherings. They found it more comfortable because they had the off-camera virtual option. However, they found it more difficult and stressful because everybody is looking at you and it's harder to engage. A lot of youth rely on the intricacies of connection when you're in person and communicating, like body language and facial expressions. And you don't get that when you are on a camera. And I know with my son, he and I are on council at our church now. We don't, getting him to engage in our Zoom meetings is like pulling his teeth. And he sits there and even, he's just not engaged and it's really hard. And I know that our meetings last year were on Zoom and there was a more diverse group, but I'm really curious what the actual age range of attendance was, because I'm knowing my own as a teacher and the engagement of students and the studies that have been shown of engaging the younger generations, the younger crowd. Kids don't want to be on Zoom. They did 2 years of Zoom school. They don't want to do it. Yes, super awesome and cost effective, but maybe a hybrid option, like the previous speaker just said, would be a better possibility for those that just can't engage in the virtual.
Thank you. Going to the red microphone. Pastor.
Yes, Tyler Bean Kelly, Zion Lutheran in the Dalles. And I just want to reflect back everything you've heard from the yeses, that every single one has said how good it is to be together. The Bishop Laurie saying, it's been 3 years and it's felt way too long since we were together. No one is disagreeing with all this. And then to hear Judith Roberts say that, being here for the first time in person with anybody, being able to get a hug, being able to cry together. Oh my gosh, that just doesn't quite happen in the same way when we're online. And I got to go out and shake Judith Roberts' hands and talk for another 20 minutes with Judith Roberts, which wouldn't happen. I got to sing campfire songs with the Camp Lutherwood last night and have s'mores and share in the physicality of all that together. And so I'm saying no. I want to be here with you. I want to love and laugh and eat together.
Thank you. Pastor Ron Werner.
Yeah, Pastor Ron Werner from Together Lab. And Tyler's one of my best friends in the Synod, so it's fun to follow that up. The last month and a half of getting to be back in person in my ministry has really unveiled just how hard the last 2 years were for me. As a super relational person who's committed to figuring out how we weave relationships and make things happen in communities, I love what I do again. I hold that in juxtaposition with how many hours the Synod staff has put into this Synod assembly. And y'all are some of the most relational people that I know. And so there's a trust for me of what happens when we free up the capacity to not have to put on this level of a production every year, and what that might unleash imagination-wise amongst all of us for in-person gatherings locally, or weaving the wild web of relationships in new ways that are not just once a year. And so, yeah, it doesn't catch me on the cost benefit analysis as much because I'm like, sometimes we got to invest in relationship and figure out how to make that happen. But what catches me is a reorientation or a restewarding of our own social capacity and getting creative together about how we weave that relationship, how we figure out how to sing songs around the campfire together, how we figure out how to be in closer relationship with Churchwide, other than you've got 20 minutes once a year. And I trust this assembly to figure that out together. And that's why I'm voting yes, as someone who is hyper relational and likes the in-person time. Thanks.
Thank you. Red microphone.
My name is Marie Westland from Faith Lutheran Church in Plattsburgh, Oregon. And I didn't know I was going to get up in here and talk until I heard somebody say something about mental health and being together. And this year, we have lost quite a few people to suicide. And one person who almost did it, who was very, very dear to me, and that's why I'm crying. But this is more valuable than money can buy. And another thing, we're in the richest country in the world. I mean, why can't we afford it? I'm not a very rich person, but I can afford it. I have somebody at home taking care of my animals for me because they support me. Got lots of animals. He has lots of animals. You know, we got the support at home. I just think it's worth our life, our physical life, and our mental health. So I guess I'm going to vote no.
Thank you. Pastor Robin Hartwig.
Pastor Robin Hartwig, pastor with Spirit of Grace in Beaverton. I want to say thank you to everybody who's spoken. I can resonate with pretty much everything that's been said at both green and red microphones in terms of advantages and disadvantages. I would love to see us expand our imagination for what is possible in terms of engagement, both in person and when we're on Zoom and when we're doing hybrid. I had the privilege of being invited by another Eco-Faith recovery leader to attend, I think it might have been the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. It could have been another BIPOC-led organization that was doing climate justice. And I showed up for that Zoom meeting, and rarely have I been engaged so deeply with other people. I was having to put things in the chat. I was doing polls. Then I was put in breakout rooms with people who I probably would not have organically just moved to talk with myself. At Spirit of Grace, I've heard from members that one of the biggest advantages of the Zoom era was the 5-minute randomly assigned sharing of the peace breakout rooms. Because the members said they recognize that a lot of times they just gravitate to their friends during the sharing of the peace or after worship service. And they felt like they got to know the community, the whole community, so much better. I really also want to commend the hybrid workshop, if you didn't have a chance to take it yesterday, or the technology workshop. I think we all need to get better at how we engage no matter what technology we're using. I'm an extrovert. I love being together as well. But like many of you, I've experienced things that have blown my mind online. I have experienced things I never imagined possible in hybrid. I have experienced getting in a breakout room on Zoom with somebody, like I said, I probably wouldn't have reached out to. And I've experienced being in an assembly hall and not engaging with other people and not taking advantage of the opportunity to talk to somebody who maybe is voting differently than me at another table. And I need to challenge myself to reach out to them. So I just hope no matter what ways we choose that we will take the invitation and challenge to get creative and curious and even better at how do we engage one another in these technologies. So I think we can do it. I think we can do it online. I think we can do it hybrid. And I love getting to come in person as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Pastor Hartwig. Hester Martinez.
Henry Martinez from Shepherd of the Valley Lutheran in Beaverton. There are a lot of reasons why I want to be at the yes microphone, and I want to kind of pick up on Pastor Robin's encouragement to expand our imaginations as well. My one concern with the moving online is that if we are doing it to invite more a younger audience, more people of color as well, folks who couldn't be here. And the bishop's election is in person. What does that say about our expectations for the election of the bishop? Just want to leave that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Green
Hello.
microphone.
Thank you. Reverend Anthony Lathan, Associate Pastor at Augustana, Portland, Oregon. This is my first time attending this, and I have to say that this is absolutely wonderful, and I'd love to do this every year. However, we do have to face realities. When you're in a leadership position, and I think that our church is in a leadership position, we have to make hard decisions. We have to lead by example. We want to do our church under Pastor Mark Knudsen, we have solar panels now. I think that we are leading in that sense. And as a church body, I think that we need to lead. And so we have to consider the environmental impact of being here every year. I think that we have to also consider the psychological impact of not coming together. So we can do this, but maybe we can do this in a modified way. Maybe we can do this every other year. And so that way we're paying attention to all aspects. We're paying attention to the psychological burden of not being together. We're paying attention to the environmental impact. We're paying attention to the financial impact. Because let's face it, folks, church and ministries do not run on goodwill. It runs on money. And is it responsible for us to spend I can even imagine how much this costs. I can just say tens of thousands. That's all I can imagine, tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even more than that. We can use some of that money for our ministries.
Thank you, Pastor. Red microphone.
I'm Harold Britton from Calvary Lutheran Church in Hillsboro, Oregon. I want to raise a few questions. I would assume that very few of us in this room belong to a congregation that has increased the membership over the last 2 years or 3 years. And I would assume that the Synod hasn't increased its membership of churches over the last 2 or 3 years, or the income on the churches or the income on the Synod. And if that's the case, I don't know whether it's the time to make a drastic change in the way we hold our annual meetings. I would also assume that the people in this room will go home fired up, ready to enact some leadership into their congregations, ready to talk to some people that are thinking about leaving, ready to talk to some people that should be doing more gathering into the church. It's probably not a time to change things. It might be an excellent idea in a couple of years. But when we're kind of going like this, and the church is kind of going like this, I don't think we should cut the one time a year when we bring people together and get them fired up to go back and make the changes in your congregation, to go back and revitalize your conversation. I've attended a lot of Zoom meetings, and I work for a company that's gone through a lot of Zoom meetings. It's hard to fire them up on a Zoom meeting, and it's real easy to just kind of go take a potty break and come back an hour and a half later if there's enough people on the Zoom meeting that you don't think you're going to be missed. So, especially if it's a little bit something that you need to hear, but you don't really want to hear. And they're kind of talking to you or people like you that really need to do something different. So I think it's not a bad idea, but it's maybe a better idea in a few weeks.
Thank you. Yes, microphone.
Hi, Jeannie Witten with Together Lab in Portland, Oregon. I would like to respectfully pose that, in fact, this is exactly the time to make changes. This morning, Bishop Lori shared with us that in the kinds of times that we're in, I forget the acronym, that we should be investing 30% of our budget in innovation. And this resolution, in my mind, isn't about relationship or not relationship. I'm curious what would happen if those $3,000 that our congregations are spending every year to come to this gathering were reinvested in relationship building in our local communities. And then what that means for the vitality and the thriving of our congregations. This is my first time at Synod Assembly, and as someone who is here because resources have been invested locally in my community, and that was my way of getting connected to the Oregon Synod by relationship, I would pose that being able to reallocate some of those resources and funds and energies and capacity into relationships in our local areas and communities is actually exactly what our church needs to do.
Thank you, Jeannie. No microphone.
Andrew Morris with Grace and Mercy in Hermiston, Oregon. I was planning to vote yes for this resolution, but my fellow congregation members and I have been making faces at each other as people have been speaking. When you look at the map earlier of the clusters, you look at the urban areas and how small those clusters are. So it's very easy in the urban areas for those clusters to talk to each other. But you look at the larger clusters and what someone said about the internet. In the rural areas, we don't have fiber optic internet. So the internet comes and goes, which is a very big issue when you have a 2-day or 3-day meeting. Also, with COVID, we already referred to the high school or school kids that have been on Zoom for 2 years as the COVID generation that have lost the ability to interact in person, lost the ability to have relationships face to face. So it's just other things to consider besides the financial impact.
Thank you, Andrew. Before I invite Pastor Mueller to the yes mic, you have a white card. Okay, good. Before I invite you to the yes mic with your white card, I wonder if I could indulge the assembly to extend this conversation 15 more minutes, shorten our hour-long lunch to 45, so that we can continue. This is a rich conversation. So if most of you, all of you nod or raise your, okay, I call this a unanimous yes. Thank you. Pastor.
Linda Mueller, Christ the King, and Milton Freewater. I call the question.
Ah. Is that seconded? Pastor Linda Mueller has made the motion.
I called for the question.
Yeah, I gave this great description of how the exact phrasing to the Synod Council, but calling the question means debate will end. It needs to be seconded and voted on before we can then vote on the resolution. Oh, and it requires a 2/3. He's got his laminated 2/3. It requires a 2/3 majority vote. So do I have a second? Second. Very good. It's not debatable. And so we will vote now, not on the resolution, but on ending debate. If you agree that debate should be ended, raise your green yes card. Well, this is going to be close, maybe. If you don't like that idea, raise your red. It's really close to 2/3. Okay, you can lower. Yes. If the deans can move quickly and they're very quick-minded, we're going to have to count. Count your own cluster. So let's again begin with the yes, time to end debate. Okay, now we're counting the yeses. No reds, no reds. Just the yeses if you are ready to end debate. And I realize some clusters, don't lower your hands yet because some clusters are in 2 locations. If you need, like Moses did, someone to help you hold your hand up, find a neighbor or switch arms. Wait until your dean says all is counted. And now if the deans would come forward to Greg, and he will do the quick addition. Do we need to count no's? Okay. 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 Have all the deans shared their numbers? Seeing that all the deans have shared their numbers, it's now time for those who oppose ending debate to raise the red no card. If you think there is more discussion to be had on this resolution about Synod Assembly, raise your card and keep it up because now the deans also have to count you. We will not count abstentions. Oh, here comes Mark. Well, while our vice president is adding things up, let's again sing. If you have your mask handy. It's possible that many of us know Spirit of the Living God. Let's just sing it through once. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Let me, mold me, fill me, use me, Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me.
The count was 78% yes, 22% no. So the motion failed.
No, 2/3. It carried.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. My mistake. The motion is approved.
Yes. We needed 66.6% and we had more than that. So that means the question has been called and now debate is ended. We will vote on the resolution regarding the type of Synod Assembly. If you are in favor of changing the pattern of Synod Assembly to every 3rd year in person, This requires a simple majority vote. Raise your green yes cards. Thank you. If you're opposed to this resolution number 2, raise your red no cards. It's close, but I see the yes has the majority. I declare voting closed. I'm supposed to do that every time. Abstentions, thank you. A lot of abstentions, but still I think I declare voting closed. Thank you for the abstention reminder. The affirmative has it and the motion is adopted. The resolution is adopted and the motion to pass the resolution. Oh, okay. Yes. Because we have 4 more resolutions and not enough time allotted to consider them all, a suggestion has come to our secretary that we forego reading the whereas clauses and just read the be it resolved clauses to get into the meat of the issue. Can I see head nods if that seems fair and just? And there are a couple no's. Does it have to be unanimous? I see. Okay. If this were a motion, it would require 2/3 affirmative. Looking like that's what we have, can we have consent, general consent to move in that direction? Okay, thank you very much. Please prayerfully consider whether you would have energy to help the Synod staff and Synod Council consider how to take all of the really excellent suggestions into account as we go forward. Thank you. How much time do we have before 12:15? Should we begin? It's hardly enough time. How about this? What if we come back 15 minutes early from lunch? Rather than separate a conversation around a hard topic, why don't we adjourn now and come back at 12:45 from our lunch? Can I see, I'm seeing many heads nodding. Okay, thank you. Very good. So are there announcements about lunch? It's my understanding. Juan Carlos, are there? Yeah, I'll just say this. Our lunches are boxed and they're right through the door. When you registered, you put your preferences. So we have just enough vegetarian meals for the vegetarians and just enough gluten-free for the gluten-freers. So if you could abide by how you registered, that would help all of us with our dietary needs. This session is now in recess for lunch. See you at 12:45. Blessings. And you can come back in here, you can leave your things, or you can go out and eat wherever you will.